Chapter 1597. On Dumpling's smooth and fair forehead, a red and gold totem the size of a fingernail appeared. The golden light was dazzling and dazzling. It made her chubby and fair face look even more exquisite and cute. Although Dumpling's entire body was round and smooth, she was actually born very well, especially her facial features, which were very beautiful. When she grew up a little, she would definitely be a cute little person with picturesque features. Now that there was a golden patch between her eyebrows, it added a bit of nobility to her. If before, everyone's first reaction when they saw Dumpling was cuteness and fondness, and they wanted to walk over and rub her little face, then when they saw her now, they definitely wouldn't have such thoughts again. Of course they still liked her, but before that, there was an extra bit of nobility, which made people unconsciously feel reverence. Dumpling raised her hand and touched the space between her eyebrows. It was hot and a little hot, but her entire body felt like it was soaking in a hot spring, and it was very comfortable. She thought for a moment, then reached out her hand and gently tapped forward. The transparent enchantment, which had been full of amazing pressure, suddenly dissipated silently and turned into starry lights. They drew an arc in the air and finally all poured into Tuanzi's body. The lotus leaf dress on her body seemed to shine even brighter. Dumpling smiled happily and ran towards Chu Luiyue. This time there was no barrier to stop her, and she quickly rushed to Chu Luiyue. "You." She threw herself onto Chu Luiyue's lap, raised her little face and said excitedly, "You. My dress seems to have become prettier." Chu Luiyue, everyone, you summoned the spirit of your ancestor and fused with the totem of your clan, and this is the first thing you thought of? Chu Luiyue resisted the urge to hold his forehead and leaned over to look at Dumpling. The two of them looked at each other. "Dumpling." Chu Luiyue reached out and pointed at her forehead. "What is this?" Dumpling shook her head. "I don't know. It flew over by itself." As she spoke, she touched it again. "I don't think I can remove it." Everyone was speechless. Too much. This was too much. What kind of glory was this? If it were anyone else, they would have been moved to tears, but only you. He actually wanted to get rid of it? Some people were so emotional that they started to roll their eyes. There were also some who gritted their teeth and secretly hated themselves for not having such luck. In short, the atmosphere became very strange. "That's the soul of our ancestor." Yizhao took a deep breath and calmed down a lot. Finally he spoke in a deep voice. Chu Luiyue looked up at him blankly. "The soul of the ancestors. That was, all those years ago when our ancestor perished and sacrificed himself to the heavens, he left behind a strand of his soul, and it's the ultimate treasure of our clan. Over the years, it has only been summoned by the successive patriarchs when they were in power." Yizhao looked at Dumpling with a complicated expression. "But today's situation has never happened before. This time, not only did the soul of the ancestors appear, but it also landed directly in between Dumpling's eyebrows and became her totem." What did this mean? It went without saying. Chu Luiyue was also shocked. In that case, the sudden appearance of the reddish gold totem was even more powerful than she had expected. Yizhao said that it would only be summoned by the successive patriarchs when they were in power. Then Dumpling, more importantly, that thing was still stuck to Dumpling's body. What should she do? Even Chu Luiyue, who had a strong heart, was a little confused at this moment. This should have already exceeded the scope of discussion for the position of the young master. Yizhao paused and finally said, "This is a very important matter. This is an important matter. Come with me." Just like that, the ancestral worship ceremony was forcefully interrupted halfway through. In the square outside the Phoenix Temple, everyone had gathered together and were discussing something in groups of 3 to 5. Their eyes, without exception, were all looking at the Phoenix Temple in front of them. The doors were tightly shut and the atmosphere was heavy. "It's already been 15 minutes. I wonder what's the situation inside. What else can it be? Pure bloodline, continuous meridian opening. Now even the soul of the ancestors has been summoned by her. What else is there to say? In any case, I'm convinced. That's precisely why things are so troublesome. If the soul of the ancestors hadn't appeared, they could have left if they wanted to. But it's different now. Even if they wanted to leave, the patriarch and elders wouldn't agree, right? This time how can the patriarch and elders have the right to speak? The soul of the ancestors has been summoned and has even merged directly into Dumpling's body. This only proves that this is the will of the ancestors. How can the patriarch and the rest dare to disobey?" Many people fell silent when they heard this. No matter what they thought, it was the truth. The soul of the ancestors symbolized the highest status of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. After today's incident, Dumpling's identity became sensitive. This was equivalent to being appointed by the ancestors. Who would dare to say no? But the most troublesome thing was that she still had a contract with Shangguanyu. No one knew what the outcome would be after today. Inside the Phoenix Temple, it was quiet and solemn. The same place, the same people. For a moment, Chu Liyue's mind flashed back to the first time she and Dumpling entered the temple. At that time they were like fish on a chopping board waiting to be slaughtered. If she wanted to talk to them as equals, she had to threaten them with death. However, in just a month the situation had completely reversed. Now the ones who had the upper hand were her and Dumpling. Yi Zhao and the rest were silent for a long time, as if they didn't know what to say. Chu Liyue didn't say anything and just waited quietly. After all, she wasn't the one who was anxious. The most relaxed person was Dumpling. After the totem landed on Chu Liyue's glabella, it quickly disappeared. Chu Liyue did not continue to pay attention to it and just obediently nestled in Chu Liyue's arms. She hugged Chu Liyue's neck and leaned against her intimately, rubbing against Chu Liyue's face from time to time. After a while, Dumpling finally couldn't help but say, "Ayu, I'm so sleepy." She rubbed her eyes and mumbled coquettishly, "When are we leaving?" As she spoke, she even snuggled into Chu Liyue's arms. Let's go, let's go. Let's go home." When Yi Zhao and the others saw this scene, their expressions changed rapidly, and their expressions were brilliant. When they thought about how the ancestor's spirit was in Dumpling's body and how she was acting coquettishly in the arms of a human, these big shots who had lived for thousands of years and had seen countless storms suddenly felt their hearts palpitate. Yi Zhao suppressed the countless emotions in his heart, took a deep breath and looked at Chu Liyue. "State your conditions." Chu Liyue was stunned. "What?" Yi Zhao said, "Since Dumpling has been appointed by the ancestor, from today onwards she will be the young master of our clan. When she reaches adulthood, she will automatically inherit the position of the clan leader. In the future you will also be an honored guest of our clan. If you have any requests, we will try our best to satisfy them. But please break the contract with Dumpling." Digression. I see that other people are starting to update their cloaks. Let's start to update them from today onwards. We will try our best to update them in February as soon as possible. Of course, the previous cloaks are also included. Alright, see you tomorrow at 12. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1598. Chu Liyue's face paled. Clan leader Yi Zhao, do you mean the previous bet is not valid? Yi Zhao closed his eyes. If it weren't for this accident, he wouldn't want the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan to be known as untrustworthy. But this matter was really unsolvable. This is also not what we want, Yi Zhao said. Now that Dumpling has inherited the spirit of our ancestor, she is bound to become the young master of our clan. It is also reasonable for her to inherit the position of clan leader in the future. Under such circumstances, it is indeed very inappropriate for her to continue to maintain the contract with you. In fact, the key to this matter was still the spirit of their ancestor. Originally, it was Yi Zhao who first proposed to let Dumpling become the young master. At that time, he didn't force Chu Liyue to terminate the contract with Dumpling. But the spirit of their ancestor appeared and merged with Dumpling's body. The whole matter had become different. If Dumpling continued to contract with her, wouldn't it be equivalent to their ancestor? This was something they couldn't accept no matter what. Yi Zhao stared at Chu Liyue and said, "In fact, even if you terminate the contract, it won't affect the relationship between you and Dumpling, right? And from now on, except for her, the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan will be your helpers. These, you will definitely not lose." Chu Liyue didn't say anything. Yi Zhao's words were not unreasonable. No matter how one looked at it, the compensation they gave had shown enough sincerity. After all, according to their usual temperament, they didn't even want to say a word more to the human race. Now that they were willing to make such a concession, it was indeed rare. In exchange for the help of the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan with Dumpling's contract. It had to be said that these conditions were indeed quite tempting. But for Chu Liyue, these were not the most important things. She still cared about Dumpling. Dumpling had obtained the ancestral soul. This was both an honor and a responsibility. If she really insisted on having her own way and only let Dumpling stay by her side as a contracted mythological beast, was that really the best choice for Dumpling? The hall was completely silent. Chu Liyue fell into deep thought. Yi Zhao and the others silently waited for her decision. Suddenly, a soft little hand waved in front of Chu Liyue. "Ayu." Dumpling looked at her nervously, her eyes full of worry and uneasiness. "You don't want Dumpling anymore?" Seeing her aggrieved and scared look, Chu Liyue's heart suddenly softened. She smiled and patted Dumpling's head. How could that be? Dumpling pounced over and hugged her neck, burying her face in her shoulder. Her originally crisp and pleasant voice sounded muffled at this moment. Don't abandon Dumpling. Dumpling will be good. Worry, fear, and grievance seemed to surge up at this moment. Chu Liyue's heart seemed to be clenched by something in an instant. She was about to say something when she suddenly felt that her shoulder was wet. Her movements suddenly stopped, and those words were stuck in her throat. No matter what, she couldn't say them. Dumpling's voice had a trace of imperceptible choking. Ayu has already abandoned Dumpling once. Dumpling doesn't want a second time. Chu Liyue's heart instantly ached. Yes, how could she forget? Back then, in the Imperial Ancestral Hall of Tianling, she chose to abandon Dumpling and die alone. Later, with great difficulty, she finally found her in the Mystic Forest. Now she was faced with such a choice again. Perhaps in her opinion, the situation and the original intention of these two times were completely different. But to Dumpling she was the one who was abandoned. Chu Liyue's eyes were slightly hot. She immediately took a deep breath, hugged Dumpling tightly and kissed her cheek. Don't worry, Ayu will always like Dumpling. She will always be with Dumpling. Dumpling's small body trembled, and only then did she raise her face. Her small face was full of tears, and two crystal-clear teardrops hung on the thick and long eyelashes at the corner of her eyes. Her nose was red and so were her eyes. She looked really pitiful. Really? She felt wronged and asked as if she didn't dare to be sure. Chu Liyue smiled and wiped away the tears on her face. Of course. As she spoke, she looked up at Yi Zhao and the others and said word by word, "Seniors, please forgive me. This request. I'm afraid I can't agree." The negotiation reached a stalemate again. Yi Zhao and the others saw Dumpling's reaction clearly. It wasn't that Shangguanyu didn't want to terminate the contract, but that Dumpling didn't want to. She had been with Shangguanyu for many years and had a deep relationship with them. It was indeed difficult for Dumpling to suddenly separate them like this. Elder Yu rolled his eyes and said with a smile, "Patriarch Tuanzi is still young and doesn't understand a lot of things. If we force her, I'm afraid it will only make her sad and create a gap between her and us. I think it's better to take this matter slowly." Take it slowly? How can we take it slowly when it concerns the position of the future clan leader? Elder Yi Gong immediately retorted. Moreover, you said to take it slowly. How long are we going to wait? Elder Yu raised his eyebrows. What's the hurry, Grand Elder? I'm also thinking for Dumpling and the entire clan. For now, this is the best way, isn't it? Since both of us have difficulties, why don't we each take a step back and compromise? When Dumpling is older, she can make her own decision. Being able to inherit the ancestor's soul proves that she has received the ancestor's approval. I think Dumpling won't let us down in the future. What do you think, clan leader? You, Elder Yi Gong was speechless. He really couldn't continue arguing when the other party mentioned the ancestor's soul. He sneered and swung his sleeves. In short, if this matter isn't handled well, our Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan will be completely disgraced. Clan leader, please think twice before making a decision. Yi Zhao's face was expressionless. In fact, he was also very conflicted at this moment. Yu and Yi Gong's words weren't without reason. This matter? He opened his mouth and subconsciously glanced at Dumpling. Shangguanyu was carefully wiping the tears from the corners of her eyes. Yi Zhao's heart seemed to have been smashed by something. He suddenly couldn't say the words that were about to come out of his mouth. After a long while, he finally held his breath as if he had made some kind of decision and said in a deep voice, "EU's suggestion is good. Things can't continue like this. Then let's each take a step back. From today onwards, Dumpling will be our clan's young master. Shangguanyu, you can continue to maintain the contract with Dumpling, but if the clan needs Dumpling, you must let her come back. After she reaches adulthood, let her make a second choice. Just in case, Dumpling needs to leave a trace of her aura so that our clan can know her situation at any time." Chu Liyue raised her eyebrows slightly. It's a deal. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1599. Chu Liyue did not hesitate at all and agreed very quickly. She knew that this was the biggest concession the other party could make. Although it was only until Dumpling reached adulthood, as an ancient divine beast who had inherited the spirit of her ancestor, this was already very rare. Chu Liyue was not one to push her luck, so she naturally agreed. "Seniors, don't worry. Dumpling has been with me for many years and we are as close as family. No matter what, I will protect her well," Chu Liyue said seriously. Yi Zhao's expression softened a little. The Shangguanyu was quite smart. There were some things that he did not say in front of Dumpling, but Shangguanyu understood. To be able to reach this stage at such a young age, she was indeed extraordinary. Yigong was shocked. Patriarch, then it settled. Yi Zhao ignored him and walked out of the hall. Dumpling, follow me. Chu Luiwei guessed something and put Dumpling down. Dumpling was a little reluctant at first, but after Chu Luiwei repeatedly assured her that she would be by his side, she finally relaxed and followed Yi Zhao. Elder Yi Shang was stunned for a moment, but he could only smile helplessly and follow them out. The other elders followed one after another. Chu Luiwei was the last to walk. Creak, the heavy and dignified door opened with a sound. Brilliant afterglow flooded in and lit up half of the Phoenix Shrine. With the sudden opening of the door, the originally noisy square suddenly quieted down. Everyone raised their heads and looked at the Phoenix Shrine. Curiosity, agitation, excitement, nervousness, all kinds of emotions surged in everyone's hearts. They all knew that since the door of the Phoenix Shrine opened, it meant that today's matter had finally come to an end. Countless pairs of eyes fell on Yi Zhao, who walked out first. His face was as solemn and indifferent as ever, and nothing could be seen from it. The atmosphere was tense and many people's hearts were beating like drums. Then the 5 elders walked out. The expressions of these people were also very complicated, especially Elder Yigong. His face was so gloomy that it seemed like it could drip water. Some people looked at each other. From the looks of it, could it be that the matter wasn't resolved smoothly? Meanwhile, another tiny figure walked out from the depths of the hall. The bells rang and her skirt swayed. Everyone's heart tightened. Here it comes. Then they saw Dumpling walk to the clan leader's side. Compared to Yi Zhao's tall figure, Dumpling looked especially petite and dainty. But she stood there, calm and composed, pure and sincere. Vaguely, there was even an indescribable air of nobility. Compared to Yi Zhao, who was full of dignity, he didn't lose much. Many people sighed inwardly. As expected of someone who had fused with the ancestral spirit. How could a child possess such an aura? Yi Zhao scanned the surroundings, his deep gaze sweeping across each and every one of them. There seemed to be a layer of invisible pressure shrouding over them. Everyone became even quieter. In the huge square, it was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Yi Zhao spoke in a deep voice. Dumpling was born with the purest bloodline. She has already taken human form and opened 4 meridians consecutively. She is indeed a role model for the younger generation. Moreover, she was appointed by the ancestral spirit and has fused with the ancestral spirit. She is the best candidate for the young clan leader. Therefore, from today onwards, Dumpling will be the young clan leader of our clan. When she reaches adulthood, she will succeed to the position of clan leader. He paused. Because she is still young, she will continue to cultivate and grow with Shangguanyu until she reaches adulthood. As these words fell, everyone was stunned for a moment. Then, one after another, the sound of cold air being sucked in could be heard. What did the clan leader mean? Tuanzi was the young master, and when she grew up, she would directly become the patriarch. But more importantly, she would continue to follow Shangguanyu until she reached adulthood? Didn't that mean that they had not broken the contract yet? How could this be? After a short moment of silence, there was an uproar in the square. Clan leader, I don't think this is appropriate. That's right. No matter what, we can't let someone with a bloodline contract with the human clan take on such a heavy responsibility, right? Dumpling is very talented, but for the position of the young clan leader, shouldn't we choose someone more suitable? Yi Zhao raised his eyelids. Why are you objecting so strongly? Do you have a better candidate, or do you want to go against the ancestral spirit's orders? This simple sentence successfully shut everyone's mouth. The ancestral spirit had already made his choice. Even the clan leader had no right to say anything, let alone them. Now that the ancestral spirit has fused with Dumpling's body, she breathes and shares the same fate as our clan. Naturally, she will carry out the heavy responsibility of reviving our clan seriously. Yi Zhao frowned as he spoke. Why are you still standing there in a daze? Someone reacted first and hurriedly said, Greetings, young clan leader. This instantly reminded the rest of the people, and they all bowed. Greetings, young clan leader. No matter what they thought, the matter was already set in stone and could not be changed. Since that was the case, the only thing they could do was to obey. Behind the crowd, Yi Ran looked at the small figure standing beside Yi Zhao from afar, and his ears buzzed. Finally, he could not hold on any longer and collapsed to the ground. Yi Zhao glanced over. He was the clan leader, and everything that happened in the square was under his control. Naturally, he knew what was going on over there, but he did not care. Clan leader, someone seems to have fainted over there, Dumpling suddenly said. After hearing Yi Zhao's words, she confirmed that she could continue to follow Chu Luiwei in the future. A huge rock in her heart was finally lifted, and her mood was much better. Although her eyes were still red, her small face was already blooming with an extremely brilliant smile, and her voice was very clear. Everyone instinctively turned around to look when they heard this. Only now did they notice that Yi Ran had actually fallen unconscious on the ground. Many people secretly exchanged glances, and they saw the shock in each other's eyes. They were so close, but they did not notice, so how did Dumpling know? Yi Zhao knew that Dumpling had fused with the ancestral spirit and was already different from ordinary people, so he was not too surprised and only turned to look at Yi Gong. Yi Gong, go and take him back. If he recuperates well, he might be able to recover sooner. Elder Yi Gong could only agree. Yes. However, just as he took a step, he heard Dumpling's voice again. You won't be able to recover. Elder Yi Gong suddenly turned around and frowned. Young clan leader, Yi Ran is at least a little older than you. How can you curse him like this? Dumpling blinked. I'm telling the truth. His third meridian is broken and can't be repaired. If you don't believe me, go and see for yourself. Elder Yi Gong did not think much of it at first, but when he heard the last sentence, his heart skipped a beat. He immediately turned around and hurried over. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1600. Everyone hurriedly opened up a path for him. Elder Yi Gong walked to Yi Ran's side, squatted down and grabbed his wrist. A moment later, his expression changed drastically. He suddenly turned around to look at Dumpling. You? His face was filled with shock and there was a trace of disbelief in his eyes. Yi Ran's third meridian was indeed broken. He was forcefully interrupted when he was opening his fourth meridian, and the backlash caused a certain amount of damage to his body. However, it was not as if there had never been a case of failure and backlash in the clan before, and no one's third meridian had been broken. Elder Yi Gong only needed to think carefully before he could roughly guess what had happened. Perhaps it was because Yi Ran was clearly agitated after failing to open his meridian, and his chi and blood went berserk. That's why, in that situation, he should have calmed down and sorted out the chaotic power in his body as soon as possible, and not continue to argue and resist so angrily. Unfortunately, in the end, Yi Ran could only blame himself for this. Elder Yi Gong gritted his teeth, the veins on his forehead bulged and his temples throbbed. He was extremely angry and aggrieved. All these years he had spent so much effort to nurture Yi Ran. In the end, it was all for nothing. With his third meridian broken, Yi Ran would basically become a cripple in the future. However, he did not even have the right or reason to blame others. Seeing this scene, what else did everyone not understand? It seemed that Yi Ran really couldn't make it. Many people sighed inwardly. Back then, Yi Ran was so proud and did not take any of his peers seriously. In the end, not only did he not become the young master, but he also became a cripple. In the future, it would be difficult for him to have a place in the entire clan. Yi Zhao lowered his head curiously and asked, Dumpling, how do you know all this? Many people pricked up their ears when they heard that. Tuanzi pouted her lips. Of course I saw it. Everyone, Yi Zhao's eyelids twitched violently. You saw it directly? One had to know that even he could not determine these things out of thin air. Dumpling. Yes. Dumpling nodded disapprovingly. Since it was so obvious, it was only natural for him to see through it. After receiving her affirmative answer, everyone fell silent. The purest bloodline and the ancestral spirit are actually so heaven-defying? There were still some people who were dissatisfied with Dumpling, but now they all shrank back. The clan leader was right. They were indeed unable to compare with Dumpling. Yi Zhao took a deep breath. After that, he didn't continue speaking about this matter and changed the topic. Since you've already become our clan's young master, you should follow me to the Phoenix Shrine and formally pay your respects to our ancestors. Dumpling nodded as if she understood. Yi Zhao turned around and led Dumpling into the Phoenix Shrine once more. When he stepped through the door, he brushed past Yi Shang and the others who were waiting at the door. The few of them bowed in unison but did not follow in. After entering the shrine, Yi Zhao's gaze fell on Chu Luiwei, who was standing behind the door. Chu Luiwei immediately understood what he meant. She straightened her back and smiled at Dumpling. Dumpling, follow the clan leader obediently. I'll wait for you outside. Dumpling nodded obediently. Chu Luiwei then slipped out. The door slowly closed. Dumpling's figure quickly disappeared. Miss Shangguan, there are chairs over there. Please wait over there. It will probably take some time for the young master to pay respects to our ancestors. The one who spoke was Elder Yi Shang, and his tone was very polite. Chu Luiyue curved her eyes. Thank you, but I'll just stand here. This place was closer to Dumpling. Although she knew that there should be layers of enchantments within the Phoenix Shrine, and such a short distance was meaningless, it was better for her to stay here. When Dumpling came out, she would be able to see her directly. Seeing her resolute attitude, Elder Yi Shang did not say anything more. He nodded, took a few steps back and waited patiently at the side. The people in the plaza did not return. They all returned to their original positions. It seemed that they had to wait together. After all, Dumpling was the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, who was selected only once every 1,000 years. Naturally, they had to wait here for the entire process to end. Elder Yi said to Elder Yi Gong with a smile. Great Elder, we're here. Don't worry. Tiki ran back first. I'm afraid his body won't be able to hold on for long. Elder Yi Gong gritted his teeth in hatred. Unfortunately, he was completely defeated in this situation. He was powerless to fight back, so he could only grit his teeth and bear with it. He helped. He ran up and quickly left. Chu Luiyue only turned her head to take a glance, then quickly retracted her gaze. The other party was not at the same level, so there was nothing to be concerned about. On the other hand, Dumpling, since she had already fused with the ancestor's soul, this ancestor worship should be done quickly, right? Dumpling followed Yi Zhao into the Phoenix Shrine and walked towards the innermost part. It was very quiet all around. Dumpling looked around as she walked. The inside was actually not much different from the main hall outside. However, the deeper she went, the more she could feel the vast pressure. Finally, the two walked to the innermost part of the Phoenix Shrine. Looking at the door in front of her, which was much smaller but more awe-inspiring, Dumpling's eyes flashed. Yi Zhao stood in front of the door. According to the clan's rules, I can't go in with you. You can only go in by yourself. Dumpling nodded, stretched out her small hand and pushed the door open. Lifting her foot, her figure quickly disappeared behind the door. The door closed again. Digression. Lazy Sister Flowery 180 ****** 920 Leaf. A leisurely time. Spicy little fairy quickly enter the group to contact the people around Pear Collar. Continue at 6 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1601. The square outside the Phoenix Shrine was completely silent. Time passed slowly. The sun set and the starry night arrived. The lanterns in the Phoenix Shrine automatically lit up. The bright light caused the entire hall to be brightly lit, splendid and resplendent. The light from the windows elongated Chu Luiyue's shadow. Chu Luiyue looked up slightly. Only a few stars dotted the black night sky. It was quiet and serene. By rough calculation, Tuanzi had been in there for 6 hours, but she hadn't come out yet. Chu Luiyue vaguely understood Elder Yi Shang's words. It seemed that Dumpling's ancestral worship would take a lot of time. But it was normal when she thought about it. Dumpling had the purest bloodline and had merged with the ancestor's soul. It was expected that it would take a little longer. Chu Luiyue swept her gaze across the square without batting an eyelid. Then she quietly retracted her gaze. She could clearly feel that some people were still looking at her with different expressions. But compared to the beginning, they were much more restrained. More of them were actually curious. Chu Luiyue didn't care much about it. She had always been a person who respected others tenfold. As long as they didn't take the initiative to find trouble with her, she was happy to coexist peacefully with them. After all, Dumpling was now the young lord. When she came of age, she would be qualified to inherit the position of clan leader. Even the 5 great elders would be slightly inferior to such a status. And as the owner of Tuanzi's contract, her status naturally rose as well. She thought about how her master and the others were worried when they were about to come more than a month ago. Who would have thought that things would turn out this way? That's right. Chu Luiyue's eyes suddenly flickered. She and Dumpling had been in there for so long, and Taizu was still waiting outside. He probably didn't know about everything that happened in the Phoenix Shrine. Who knew how worried he was now? Elder Yu? Chu Luiyue took 2 steps to the side and said in a low voice. Elder Yu could be considered as the person she was most familiar with here, and she trusted him quite a bit. Asking him for help was naturally the most appropriate choice. What happened? Elder Yu was originally leaning against a pillar with his arms crossed, as if he was thinking about something. He was surprised to see Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue smiled and said, Yes. Elder Yu, may I trouble you with something? When Dumpling and I came here, Taizu was also with us. It's just that when we entered the Phoenix God Mountain, Taizu stayed there. You want to invite him in? Elder Yu stroked his chin. I'm afraid this will be a little difficult. It was all thanks to Dumpling that she was able to enter Shangguanyu. As for the others, he definitely couldn't let them in so easily. You misunderstood. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes. I just want to ask you to help me pass on a message. As long as you can let Taizu know that Dumpling and I are fine now, it's fine. She and Taizu actually had a way to sense each other's presence. However, she could only know a rough idea at most. She couldn't know the specifics. If she could send a message out and let Taizu know that they were fine here, she would feel at ease. The main thing is, I don't know when Dumpling's matter will end, so, oh, you're talking about that? Simple. Elder Yu was immediately amused when he heard that. I thought it was a big deal. Don't worry, leave it to me. As he spoke, he suddenly raised his hand. With a flash of light, a reddish gold feather appeared in his hand. He handed the feather to Chu Luiyue. If you have anything you want to say, just write it down with this thing. Alright, remember to use fire when you write. Of course, ordinary humans wouldn't be able to use this thing. However, Chu Luiyue and Dumpling had a contract, so this was naturally not a problem. Chu Luiyue thanked him and took the feather with both hands. This was somewhat similar to the ancestor's golden feather that had appeared before, but its size and color couldn't be compared to this one. It should be Elder Yu's own feather. Chu Luiyue pondered for a moment, then a reddish gold flame instantly rose from her palm. Then, she held the feather in her hand and wrote a few lines in the air. Flames flowed out from the tip of the feather where it moved, and then quickly disappeared. It's done. After Chu Luiyue finished writing, she handed the feather back. Elder Yu took it with a smile. With a light wave of his wrist, the feather floated up and flew into the distance. Not long after, he disappeared into the thick night. He should receive your letter soon. Chu Luiyue's red lips curled up. Thank you. Yintian Tower. Back then, when the patriarch returned, he directly entered this place and didn't leave until he was discovered. A group of people stood in front of a hall. Rong Xiu stood at the very front, and Elder Yu Jingzuan stood behind him as he carefully explained. After discovering that the patriarch had fainted, I tried a few methods, but I couldn't wake him up. I hurriedly informed the other elders. After that, 36 revered Elder Ming rushed over first and invited the patriarch to the sacrificial god hall. As Elder Yu Jing spoke, his hands and his sleeves tightened. Actually, at that time he was the first to inform Elder Tong Chuan. Unfortunately, 36 revered Elder Ming's reaction was extremely fast, and he actually rushed over before everyone else. He directly proposed to bring Bailey Jun to the sacrificial god hall. Naturally, no one dared to refute and agreed. After that, we also strengthened the defense of this place and ordered people to guard it strictly. We didn't dare to slack off in the slightest. Elder Yu Jing lowered his head and was very respectful and careful. After the previous confrontation, he didn't dare to speak to Rong Xiu face to face. In front of Rong Xiu, he always felt like he was being seen through. It was as if any thoughts he had, or even the slightest thought, would be seen through by him. This feeling was really not good, so he could only follow the principle of speaking less, making fewer mistakes. Other than the necessary words, he would try his best to become an invisible person at other times. Rong Xiu looked at the tightly shut door and narrowed his eyes dangerously. Other than you and 36 revered Elder Ming, who else has entered this place? Elder Yu Jing's gaze drifted. Elder Tong Chuan said, Your Highness, after 36 revered Elder Ming brought the patriarch away, this old man also entered this place to investigate carefully. Unfortunately, I didn't find any clues. Rong Xiu glanced at him. Elder Tong Chuan went in alone? Elder Tong Chuan hesitated for a moment. Elder Yu Jing also accompanied him. Rong Xiu's scarlet lips curled up slightly. They were all his people, so it wasn't that important whether they went in together or not. He turned his gaze. 36 revered Elder Ming, didn't you notice anything unusual at that time? 36 revered Elder Ming frowned and shook his head. At that time he had indeed investigated seriously, but Rong Xiu nodded in understanding. He lifted his clothes and walked forward. Then I will go in and take a look myself. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1602. Esteemed elders, come in as well. As Rong Xiu spoke, he flicked his sleeves and the door opened. He walked to the entrance before pausing. Then he turned around and said with an impassive smile, If any of you have any doubts, feel free to follow me. The crowd stared at one another and the atmosphere turned a little awkward. Previously in the ethereal hall, they were rendered speechless by Rong Xiu's rebuttal and questioning. After which, Rong Xiu proposed to take a look personally. Given the current situation, it was clear that he was still targeting them. Was there any doubt in his heart? Wasn't he mocking them for doubting and questioning him previously? 36 Esteemed Elder Ming took the lead and followed behind him. It's good for everyone to come in and take a look. Perhaps we might have really missed something previously, and we can rely on everyone's help to find some clues. Esteemed Elder Tong Chuan's face darkened, and he quickly followed behind. After which, it was Esteemed Elder Yu Jing and the others. The various clan heads hesitated for a moment. Seeing Rong Xiu and the others gradually disappearing from sight, they felt a little uneasy. Eventually, they gritted their teeth and followed behind him. Bailey Jun was the clan head. Naturally, his residence was extravagant. Rong Xiu walked all the way to Bailey Jun's bedroom. Actually, at Bailey Jun's level, even if he didn't sleep for an entire month, it wouldn't affect him much. Thus, even though this was his bedroom, he spent most of his time cultivating here. Rong Xiu walked into the room, stood in his original spot and sized up the room. The exterior was already extravagant, but the interior was even more so. After entering, a few of the clan heads couldn't help but gasp in astonishment. Other than Bailey Jun, no one was qualified to enter this place. It was inevitable that they would be shocked to see such a sight for the first time. Esteemed Elder Tong Chuan glared at the few of them in displeasure, and they immediately shut their mouths, not daring to utter a single word. However, at this moment Rong Xiu suddenly chuckled. The Patriarch's room is very big and there are 2 side halls beside it. Let's split up and search. Remember to search carefully. You don't have to restrain yourself just because this is the clan leader's bedroom. One had to know that finding clues and finding out the truth was the most important thing for the Patriarch. No one dared to disagree and they all nodded. Yes, Holy Son. Elder Tong Chuan's lips moved, but he didn't say anything in the end. He just looked at Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu stood in place for a while before walking forward. Just when everyone thought he was going to start looking for clues, he suddenly walked to a chair by the window and sat down. Everyone froze. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. You guys go about your business. No one dared to say anything and continued to search. Rong Xiu just sat there, unmoving like a mountain. There seemed to be a hint of leisure between his brows. After a while, he raised his eyes slightly and looked at Elder Tong Chuan and Elder Yu Jing. His lips curled into a faint smile. Why don't the 2 revered elders look for him? These words made the 2 of them choke. His tone was too condescending. He was simply treating them like slaves. It really made people unhappy. Elder Tong Chuan paused and asked in return. Your Highness, why don't you look for him personally? Rong Xiu replied with an "oh," and the smile on his face deepened. I have been dealing with a lot of things recently and am a little tired. I plan to rest first. Moreover, with all of you revered elders and the Patriarch around, I am very assured. Elder Tong Chuan felt his blood boil. Rong Xiu was really addicted to ordering them around. He gritted his teeth and quickly responded, then turned and walked in the other direction. Elder Yu Jing didn't dare to say anything and went in the other direction. Hence, the entire space became one where Rong Xiu sat down and rested while the others searched hard. This continued for about an hour before everyone finally stopped. Your Highness, we didn't find anything. Your Highness, we didn't find anything either. There doesn't seem to be anything out of the ordinary. Everyone present was the most important person in the Yuntian Tower. Even after searching together, they still didn't find anything out of the ordinary. It seemed that the matter was still unsolved. Rong Xiu lowered his eyes and didn't say anything. He seemed to be deep in thought. Elder Tong Chuan walked over and cupped his hands. Your Highness, we did our best to search, but we didn't find anything. His tone returned to its usual indifference and arrogance. There was only a trace of undetectable mockery in his eyes. Search? Naturally, they couldn't find anything here. Rong Xiu had brought so many people here, but in the end he was just busy. Did he really think that he could do whatever he wanted just because he was the Patriarch? This farce would only make the people below even more dissatisfied with him. On the surface, it seemed like Rong Xiu had a lot of power in Yuntianke, but in actual fact he only had control over the soldiers that he brought out himself. The tribes below him seemed to be very respectful to him on the surface, but in reality, when Rong Xiu took over he wasn't old enough. When he was old enough he suddenly left for a few years. During this time, Tong Chuan had been in charge of reviewing the Yuntian Tower's memorials. Rong Xiu came back this time and took back his power less than a year ago. How much power did he have in his hands? It was still a question mark. Rong Xiu still didn't say anything. Elder Tong Chuan frowned impatiently. Your Highness. A roar suddenly came from afar. Then a snow-white figure jumped in through the window. It was Shui. Everyone was shocked by this sudden scene. When they saw Shui's appearance, they were even more shocked. Shui's body was stained with specks of blood, and its face was scratched by something. Its flesh and blood were twisted, and the smell of blood filled the air. They all knew that Rongxiu's contracted beast was extremely strong. It rarely lost, let alone in such a sorry state. They didn't know what it had gone through. Moreover, it seemed to be biting something in its mouth. Rongxiu got up and patted Shui's head. You've worked hard. Shui shook its head and spat out the thing in its mouth. Clang. A wooden plaque fell to the ground. Elder Tong Chuan's expression changed dramatically. Digression. Tonight at 9 o'clock there will be a supper. Please check for mobile users. A better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1603. It was a black wooden tablet stained with mottled blood. It lay quietly on the ground, emitting a scarlet cold light. Some kind of pattern could be vaguely seen on it. Everyone present looked over with a blank expression. Why did Shui suddenly bring this thing back at this time? Among the crowd, only respected Elder Tong Chuan's face was pale and ugly. His hands moved in his sleeves, but his feet seemed to be nailed to the ground, unable to move. This is 36. Respected Elder Ming took a step forward and took a look. Suddenly his expression changed. This is the Black Demon Cave's wooden tablet. Wait. The grade of this wooden tablet doesn't seem to be low. Respected Elder has good eyesight. Rongxiu raised his eyebrows slightly. Only the 8 Hall Masters of the Black Demon Cave have this wooden tablet. In the Black Demon Cave, the Hall Master status was second only to their Demon Master. They were all powerful existences that could intimidate a region. When everyone heard this, they all revealed a look of shock. Hall Master. Hasn't the Black Demon Cave been hidden for many years? Why did they suddenly appear now? The higher the status of the people of the Black Demon Cave, the more they value the wooden tablet. A wooden tablet of such a grade is extremely difficult to find. I wonder where you got this piece from? 36. Respected Elder Ming frowned. Could it be that Shui had a conflict with one of the Hall Masters of the Black Demon Cave? It seemed that this wooden tablet was not easy to obtain. Even Shui was injured. Shui exhaled and looked at respected Elder Tong Chuan. Her icy blue eyes were as sharp as ice blades. It was as if she wanted to peel off a layer of his skin. Respected Elder Tong Chuan's heart sank. When he saw Dumpling return with the wooden tablet, he already knew that something bad would happen. He just held on to the last glimmer of hope that they did not notice. But now it seemed that it was impossible. Sensing Dumpling's gaze, everyone was puzzled at first. Then their expressions became strange. It was not right for Dumpling to target respected Elder Tong Chuan. And respected Elder Tong Chuan's reaction was even more wrong. Rongxiu raised his chin and said indifferently, Respected Elder Tong Chuan, aren't you going to claim this item? As soon as he finished speaking, the originally quiet room became even more deathly still. Although they had expected that something was wrong, many people still widened their eyes in shock when they heard the hidden meaning in Rongxiu's words. Isn't this the wooden token of the Hall Master of the Black Demon Cave? How could the Holy Sun be recognized by Elder Tong Chuan? This old man doesn't know what your highness means. Senior Tong Chuan clenched his fists in his old sleeves, trying his best to make his voice sound as calm as usual. However, his heart was beating crazily and his blood was gushing as if it was about to explode at any moment. Some time ago I felt that the Yuntian Tower was a little dirty. After I left, I got Shui to guard this place in secret. After such a long time, she has indeed gained something. Rongxiu said slowly. His voice was slightly drawn out and there was a hint of carelessness in it. However, a thread in respected Elder Tong Chuan's mind suddenly tightened. The slightest carelessness would cause it to snap. Respected Elder Tong Chuan, this wooden token was indeed taken back by Shui from someone. Now that person is already dead. However, there is still a trace of aura left on this wooden token. It is obvious that the person who died was not the true owner of this wooden token. The most important thing is that the aura inside is very familiar to I. Why don't respected Elder Tong Chuan take a look personally? Do you also feel that déjà vu? Respected Elder Tong Chuan's body stiffened. A chill suddenly surged up from the bottom of his feet. Rongxiu's thin lips curled up slightly as if he was smiling. However, his deep phoenix eyes were like the coldest and sharpest sword, piercing straight into one's heart. If I am not wrong, This aura seems to be very similar to respected Elder Tong Chuan's aura. As soon as he finished speaking, the temperature in the room plummeted, as if it was frozen. At this moment, even the air seemed to have frozen. I wonder if respected Elder Tong Chuan has anything to say about this? There was no anger on Rong Xiu's face. His handsome and devilish face was calm. The corners of his eyes and brows carried the usual indifference and coldness. His brows were slightly raised and the corners of his mouth were slightly curled, adding a bit of indifference. Respected Elder Tong Chuan's lips moved. However, he felt that his throat was dry and tight. When he spoke, his voice was also inexplicably hoarse and tighter. This old man doesn't know. Oh right, there is something I almost forgot. Rong Xiu suddenly interrupted him and smiled. Previously, I said that I did not find out the reason why the clan leader is unconscious. However, when I saw this wooden token just now, I suddenly thought of something. The people of the Black Demon Cave are very strong. They can use some kind of seal to make people unconscious. This kind of seal is extremely sinister and vicious. Because other than being unconscious, there is nothing wrong with the sealed person's body. However, as time passes, the sealed person's strength will gradually dissipate. Their soul will also completely collapse after being tortured. At most a year, at least 3 months, the sealed person's soul will quietly be destroyed and they will completely die. Now that I think about it, the clan leader should be under this seal. Respected Elder Tong Chuan, what do you think? Respected Elder Tong Chuan's face could no longer be described as ugly. He looked at Rong Xiu in shock and absent-mindedness. It seemed that he did not expect him to say such a thing. How do you know? No. This old man does not understand what your highness just said. Respected Elder Tong Chuan tried to deny it. However, at this time all his words sounded particularly weak. Respected Elder Tong Chuan wants to ask, how did I know about these top-secret spells of the Black Demon Cave? Rong Xiu chuckled. A few years ago someone wanted to place this seal on I. Unfortunately they did not succeed. However, these things, I knew about it from then on. Respected Elder Tong Chuan, do you want to know who that person is? Digression. Good night, mobile users. Please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1604. The last trace of blood on revered Elder Tong Chuan's face completely faded. Everyone was shocked. 36 Revered Elder Ming frowned and took a step forward. Your Highness, I'm fine. Rong Xiu smiled faintly. I don't care about these tricks. 36 Revered Elder Ming pursed his lips. There was still a hint of self-blame and guilt between his brows. This old man is incompetent. I actually failed to sense the danger your highness was in. Although Rong Xiu had downplayed it, it was not difficult to imagine how powerful the seal was from his description just now. He could explain it in a few words, but anyone who thought about it would know that Rong Xiu must have experienced all kinds of difficulties and dangers back then. And he was completely unaware of all of this. Ever since Rong Xiu returned to the Yuntian Tower back then, 36 Revered Elder Ming had always taken good care of him and almost treated him as half a son. However, he did not expect that there would be such a huge mistake. As if guessing his thoughts, Rong Xiu's gaze became gentler. Speaking of which, this happened a few years ago when I had just left the Yuntian Tower. It's normal that you don't know about it. 36 Revered Elder Ming came to a realization. So that's how it is. At that time, Rong Xiu had just taken over. On the surface, the Yuntian Tower looked peaceful, but in reality there were undercurrents. At that time he stayed behind to take care of Rong Xiu and did not go out with Rong Xiu. After that, Rong Xiu kept in contact with him, so he stayed in the Yuntian Tower at ease and did not think too much about it. Who knew there would be such a thing? Rong Xiu looked at Revered Elder Tong Chuan again and raised his eyebrows. His gaze was as if it was tangible, and it was filled with deterrence as it landed on Revered Elder Tong Chuan. Revered Elder Tong Chuan's eyelids twitched. Your Highness, are you suspecting that I was the one who attacked you back then? He suddenly sneered. Your Highness, this old man was born as a member of the Yuntian Tower. For hundreds of years I have been loyal and devoted. Countless people in the Yuntian Tower can testify to this. You can say that this old man is arrogant and hot-tempered, but this is absolutely impossible. You are the holy son of the Yuntian Tower, and the person with the highest bloodline talent in the Yuntian Tower in the past 1,000 years. Why would this old man want to kill you? Or, did they use the methods of the Black Demon Cave? Elder Tong Chuan's expression was furious, as if he had suffered a great humiliation and grievance, and was extremely angry. You slandered this old man like this today. If you can't produce evidence, this old man will definitely not agree. His angry and agitated voice echoed throughout the room. The expressions of many people around him began to waver. To be honest, Elder Tong Chuan might not have been that respectful to the saint, and he might have even wanted to seize power for himself. However, he had nothing to say about the Yuntian Tower. How could he have anything to do with the people of the Black Demon Cave? Not to mention, Rong Xiu was saying that Elder Tong Chuan was one of the 8 hall masters of the Black Demon Cave? This sounded even more ridiculous. Rong Xiu glanced at him and nodded with a smile. Okay. Elder Tong Chuan was stunned for a moment before he realized what Rong Xiu meant. It seemed that he really had evidence. Then he saw Rong Xiu raise his chin at Xue Xue and say very gently, "The Black Demon Cave seal of the Black Demon Cave is very precious. The Black Demon Cave's Hall Master's sea buckthorn wooden tablet is extremely precious. I'm sure it'll be extremely effective if I use it to grind my teeth." Roar. Xue Xue let out a low roar, then pounced forward and held the wooden token in its mouth. Its sharp white teeth bit down on the black wooden token, flashing with a cold light. Elder Tong Chuan's heart skipped a beat, then he forced himself to calm down. It was just a divine beast. If it wanted to destroy this wooden token, it was still, crack. Xue Xue bit down hard and a crack instantly appeared on the wooden token. Elder Tong Chuan widened his eyes in shock. How is this possible? When did that beast have such combat strength? Before he could figure it out, a second crisp sound was heard. Crack. The sound of the wooden token cracking sounded like a death sentence in Elder Tong Chuan's ears. He didn't think and immediately moved to snatch the token back from Xue Xue's mouth. Whoosh. The moment he moved, his eyes flashed, and Rong Xiu appeared in front of him, silently stopping his actions. "Elder Tong Chuan, what are you doing? Since that wooden token belongs to one of the 8 hall masters, as long as it's destroyed, even if the owner of the wooden token isn't here, he will suffer a severe backlash. But, why are you in such a hurry?" Elder Tong Chuan's face was pale, and large amounts of sweat appeared on his forehead. He looked up and saw Rong Xiu looking at him with a faint smile. Oh no. Elder Tong Chuan's heart sank. No matter how much he said before when he attacked, it was equivalent to admitting to all of Rong Xiu's accusations. Elder Tong Chuan gritted his teeth, and a black fog suddenly appeared in the depths of his eyes. A cold and sinister aura instantly spread out from his body. Rong Xiu narrowed his eyes, and the smile on his face seemed to be covered with a layer of frost, cold and biting. Suddenly the aura around Elder Tong Chuan surged. He suddenly raised his arm. A long black saber suddenly appeared in his hand. In the next moment he stabbed towards Rong Xiu without hesitation. The two of them were very close and Elder Tong Chuan's attack was very sudden. The sharp blade was about to land on Rong Xiu's shoulder. "Your Highness, be careful." Everyone was shocked. No one expected Elder Tong Chuan to attack without hesitation, and his attack was so ruthless. 36 Elder Ming waved his sleeves, and a ray of force flew out, heading straight for Elder Tong Chuan's back. However, at this moment, a layer of black fog suddenly appeared around Rong Xiu and Elder Tong Chuan, and it instantly condensed into a barrier, sealing them within. Clang. 36 revered Elder Ming's origin power hit the barrier and let out a muffled sound. The barrier shook and circles of ripples appeared, but it did not shatter. 36 Elder Ming and the rest's expressions changed. His strength was slightly stronger than Elder Tong Chuan, but from the situation of this barrier, Elder Tong Chuan seemed to be able to stand up to him as an equal. At this moment, Elder Tong Chuan had arrived and he had already slashed down. Everyone subconsciously held their breaths. However, Rong Xiu's footsteps shifted slightly, and he narrowly avoided this attack. The space beside him was actually torn open by that black saber. A cluster of golden flames suddenly appeared in Rong Xiu's palm. After missing his attack, Elder Tong Chuan did not continue fighting. He actually turned around and slashed towards Xue Xue. The most important thing now was to retrieve that wooden tablet. Xue Xue leaped and quickly dodged. Elder Tong Chuan was shocked and he was in disbelief. This divine beast's speed had clearly far exceeded its normal standard. Xue Xue bit that wooden tablet and for the first time, it was glad that it was sent to Red Moon Desert by its master. It turned around and jumped out of the window. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1605. Respected Elder Tong Chuan immediately chased after him. But before he could move, a golden light flashed in front of him. In the next moment, a golden flame formed a barrier in front of him. Scram. Respected Elder Tong Chuan's old voice exploded with a hoarse roar. At this moment, his eyes were completely covered by the black fog. Cold, mournful, cold, it made people shudder when they looked at it. He raised his hand and slashed down fiercely. Right now he could not care about anything else. The most important thing was to get that black wooden tablet back. With one slash, that golden flame was split apart from the middle. Just as respected Elder Tong Chuan was about to pass through it, he saw that the flame actually split into two ropes and surrounded him from both sides. He subconsciously dodged and crazily waved the black blade in his hand, wanting to block it outside. Because he was too clear about how terrifying Rong Xiu's flame was. Once entangled, poof, a golden spark suddenly exploded beside his ear. Respected Elder Tong Chuan turned his head stiffly and discovered that there was already a small ball of golden flame behind him. At this moment, the golden flame blossomed and transformed into countless resplendent rays of light that floated in the air. Respected Elder Tong Chuan was shocked. He subconsciously raised his head to take a look. Outside the window, Xue Xue's figure had already disappeared. But within his body there was an intense pain. The wooden tablet was beginning to be destroyed. Respected Elder Tong Chuan became more and more alarmed. A strange sound suddenly entered his ears. Respected Elder Tong Chuan regained his senses and instantly opened his eyes wide in shock. Unknowingly, those stars were dancing in all directions, drawing out streaks of flowing light. They intertwined with each other and actually formed an incomparably complicated profound formation. This Shin formation was not big, but it firmly bound him within it. His heart was uneasy and he wanted to break free. But at this moment he suddenly realized that he could not use the force in his body. I have been researching this God-sealing formation for a long time, and only today did I have the chance to test it out. It looks pretty good, Rong Xiu said unhurriedly. There was even a slight smile on his face, as if he was quite satisfied with the effects of this profound formation. Elder Tong Chuan, however, was greatly shocked. How could this be? Rong Xiu was only a high deity. Even if he had two divine physiques and two divine realms, he was still only a high deity. But he was a venerable god. How did Rong Xiu's Shen formation achieve such power? One had to know that even though above the high god level was the god level, the gap between the two was like a chasm. In the divine ruins world there were countless high gods. However, a high god expert was extremely precious. They all knew that Rong Xiu's combat strength was higher than other cultivators of the same level. But they hadn't expected that he would actually be able to go against an expert of the revered god realm. Not to mention Elder Tong Chuan, even the spectators were all stunned. There was no other reason why Elder Tong Chuan had such a high position in the Yuntian Tower in the past. It was because he was strong enough. But now he was actually at a disadvantage when fighting with the Holy Son Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu didn't give Elder Tong Chuan much time to react. He raised his hand slowly. His long and slender fingers gently clenched. Buzz. The God-sealing formation shone brightly. In an instant, Elder Tong Chuan felt as if his entire body was being ruthlessly crushed by something. Intense pain came from every part of his body. It was almost maddening. Elder Tong Chuan finally couldn't hold it in and let out a shrill cry of pain. Surrounded by the light, no one could see his appearance clearly. They could only roughly see the outline of his body and the blood that was constantly dripping from the ground. The strange thing was that the color of the blood was actually black and red, and it carried a strong stench. On the ground, the exquisite jade tiles seemed to be corroded by the blood. They emitted a sizzling sound and black fog was emitted. This scene made everyone's hair stand on end. If they still couldn't see that Elder Tong Chuan was from the Black Demon Cave, then they didn't need to stay in the Divine Ruins world. Elder Tong Chuan's voice gradually became softer. He also seemed to have stopped struggling. Only the blood on the ground was increasing. At a certain moment, the layer of black fog that Elder Tong Chuan had set up suddenly shattered. Bang! The black fog quickly dispersed and gathered into Elder Tong Chuan's body. But this bit of power was already a drop in the bucket for the current him. The light on the God-sealing formation gradually dissipated. Elder Tong Chuan's figure reappeared in everyone's line of sight. Someone couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air, then immediately fell silent. The room was deathly silent. But in every pair of eyes, there was still shock and horror that hadn't faded. At this moment, the person who had reappeared in front of them could no longer be considered a person. Elder Tong Chuan's entire body seemed to have been sucked dry by something, becoming shriveled and withered. His cheeks were deeply sunken and there wasn't the slightest trace of blood on his face. Only a pair of already black eyes were staring, filled with panic, mournful, and resentment. Looking at it made one's heart uneasy. And in between his eyebrows, a totem had unknowingly appeared. That wasn't the totem of the Yuntian Tower, but the Black Demon Cave. Suddenly Elder Tong Chuan opened his mouth. A hoarse, low, and sinister laugh that was completely different came from afar. Rong Xiu, I've really underestimated you. Digression. Insomnia yesterday, not in the right state in the morning. 6 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read, a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1606. As soon as he said that, Tong Chuan's body suddenly started burning. Thick black mist was emitted from within, bringing with it a nauseating stench of rotting corpses. Everyone's expression changed slightly. 36 Respected Elder Ming frowned. Your Highness, be careful. Bang! An explosion suddenly sounded. Respected Elder Tong Chuan's body exploded just like that. Rong Xiu's expression turned serious, and the God-Sealing formation immediately started spinning. The splattered flesh and black mist were all swallowed by a powerful force, and finally disappeared in that light. About half an hour later, the light dissipated, and only a dried dark red bloodstain was left on the ground. Rong Xiu narrowed his eyes slightly. Brr. Following this roar, Shue's figure appeared outside the window once again. It flew in front of Rong Xiu and spat out the wooden tablet in its mouth. That black wooden tablet had already shattered into several pieces. Rong Xiu's expression was indifferent as he raised his fingers slightly. A golden flame flew out and landed on that wooden tablet, burning quietly. In just a moment, that wooden tablet had completely turned into ashes. So many things had happened in such a short period of time that everyone present was so shocked that they didn't know what to say. Everyone looked at the ashes and the remaining bloodstains and couldn't recover for a long time. 36 Respected Elder Ming finally couldn't help but say, I didn't expect Tong Chuan to be the Hall Master of Black Demon Cave. He isn't the real Tong Chuan. Rong Xiu suddenly said. 36 Respected Elder Ming was shocked. Your Highness, you mean? Rong Xiu's words were concise and comprehensive. Possession. Everyone fell into silence. After a long while, 36 Respected Elder Ming sighed in realization. I see. If that was the case, it wasn't difficult to explain why Tong Chuan had been staying in the Yuntian Tower all these years without being discovered. It turned out that he had been replaced midway. Then the real Tong Chuan, 36 Revered Elder Ming was halfway through his words when his voice stopped abruptly. Actually, there was no need to ask this question anymore. Since he had been possessed, the real Elder Tong Chuan was naturally no longer in this world. Rong Xiu pondered for a moment. It should be a few years ago. When I just left the Yuntian Tower, there was already a change of people. In fact, he had already had suspicions since then, but because he had other things to do at that time, he did not personally investigate. From then on, Elder Tong Chuan didn't reveal any abnormalities, nor did he leave behind any evidence. If he wanted to investigate further, it would be even more difficult. Until the incident on Bailey June, but hasn't the Black Demon Cave gone into seclusion in recent years? Why would they go through so much trouble to send a Hall Master to sneak into our Yuntian Tower? The other supremacy was confused as he silently glanced at Rong Xiu. Furthermore, the other party's target seemed to be the successor? Even this time, the target of the attack on clan leader Bailey June seemed to be Rong Xiu. Only by living in seclusion can one have the time and energy to do other things. Rong Xiu said indifferently. Actually, the voice just now didn't belong to the possessed Hall Master, but, in order to deal with him, the other party had used all kinds of methods, even sacrificing a Hall Master. 36 Great Lord Ming asked in a deep voice. Your Highness, what should we do after this? Do you have any plans? The other party had bullied them. This matter couldn't be let go just like that. Moreover, Elder Tong Chuan had always held an important position in the Yuntian Tower. Who knew how many secrets he had stolen? If one were to calculate this debt, it would be even more shocking. Their target is I. Rong Xiu seemed to have guessed what he was thinking and said indifferently, Rest assured, Elder Tong Chuan. Although Elder Tong Chuan has been in power for the past few years, but what he knows is what I let him know. I just didn't expect him to wait until today to make his move. However, UMO and the others should have cleaned up most of the mess outside by now. This meant that when he was dealing with revered Elder Tong Chuan, the people outside had already surrounded and suppressed his subordinates. Everyone had a complicated expression when they heard this. Shock, surprise, lamentation. At this moment, they finally understood that Rong Xiu didn't call them over to investigate the reason why Bailey Jun was unconscious. He had made up his mind to attack Elder Tong Chuan today. It was just catching a turtle in a jar. 36 Great Lord Ming heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. That's good, that's good. Your Highness has always been good at strategizing. This old man is really ashamed. Rong Xiu smiled. Previously, for the sake of convenience, there were some things that I didn't tell you. I hope you can forgive me. At this point, what else did 36 Great Lord Ming not understand? Rong Xiu seemed to have left the Yuntian Tower for the past few years and didn't put much effort into the matters here. Instead, he handed everything over to 36 Great Lord Ming. But in reality, he had already secretly laid down another huge net. 36 Great Lord Ming wasn't angry. On the contrary, he was very gratified and happy. He had watched Rong Xiu grow up. He knew how outstanding Rong Xiu was. Along the way, he had also seen Rong Xiu's growth. But it was only today that he could finally be at ease. Rong Xiu's thoughts and methods were definitely enough to support him to secure his position as the son of Saint. Killing Tong Chuan today was to eradicate the scourge. At the same time, it was to kill the chicken to warn the monkeys, to warn those who didn't know their place. Even someone like Elder Tong Chuan didn't have a good ending in Rong Xiu's hands, let alone them? 36 Great Lord Ming looked around and nodded in satisfaction when he saw their expressions. From today onwards, all the troubles in the Yuntian Tower should be resolved. One of them had an especially interesting expression. 36 Great Lord Ming raised his eyebrows. Great Lord Yujing, you have always been close to Elder Tong Chuan. These matters? I don't know. Without waiting for him to finish, Great Lord Yujing hurriedly denied it. He looked nervously at Rong Xiu with a pale face. Your Highness is wise. I really don't know anything about these matters. Although I have a good relationship with him, it's only because his status is higher that I have no choice but to obey. But actually, I didn't participate in these matters. This is absolutely true. Because of his anxiety and worry, his voice sounded a little shrill. By the time he finished speaking, his head was already covered in cold sweat. Great Lord Yujing wasn't stupid. Elder Tong Chuan was from the Black Demon Cave and had even attacked the son of Saint. If he had anything to do with him now, he would probably be consigned to eternal damnation. He had to get himself out of this. Rong Xiu lowered his eyes and glanced at Xue Xue. Go clean up the Spring of Harmony. It's too dirty. The Spring of Harmony was a hot spring on Duming Peak. Usually, very few people were qualified to go there. Most importantly, the spring water of the Spring of Harmony had the effect of healing injuries. Xue Xue's injuries weren't light this time. Hearing this, Xue Xue responded happily and hurriedly turned to leave. Rong Xiu then raised his eyes and looked at Great Lord Yujing. He raised his eyebrows slightly with a faint smile. You really don't know anything? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1607. Elder Yu Jingzuan choked, and hesitation flashed in his eyes. But it was only for a moment, and his expression quickly returned to normal, and he vowed firmly, I really don't know. Rong Xiu's smile deepened, but it carried a bit of cold sarcasm. After the patriarch fainted, you were the first to find out, and then you called Elder Tong Chuan over. Now, the reason why the patriarch fainted is clear, it was Elder Tong Chuan who sealed him. Don't you think there's something wrong with the timing? Elder Yu Jingzuan was at a loss for words, and after hesitating for a moment he explained, he must have attacked the patriarch first. Then he pretended that nothing happened and pushed all the blame away. Must be like this. There's one thing you might not know. After the seal was placed, the patriarch's body could no longer accept the force from the outside world. Naturally, this includes the force in the human body. Elder Yu Jingzuan suddenly realized something, and the rest of his words were stuck in his throat. He looked up at Rong Xiu in shock, but only saw the man's eyes that seemed to have seen through everything. Your Highness? His lips squirmed as if he wanted to say something, but he couldn't make a sound. Rong Xiu's words were very clear. Everyone's eyes fell on him, but at this moment, he felt as if there was a knife on his back. His mind was blank and only a voice echoed in his mind. It's over, it's really over, plop. Elder Yu Jingzuan suddenly knelt down, and his knees heavily smashed on the jade bricks, producing a dull sound that made one's teeth ache. He pressed his head against the ground and begged, Your Highness. I admit, I followed Elder Tong Chuan's orders and went in first to attack the patriarch, but I really don't know. Bailey Jun's strength had increased greatly after coming out of seclusion. Although he had suffered a blow because of Jiang Jiwan's matter, His combat strength was still not to be underestimated. At that time the two of them went in together and he made the first move, followed by Elder Tong Chuan. Elder Tong Chuan had only said that he wanted to push all the blame onto Rong Xiu and pull him down from the position of Holy Son. Honorable Elder Yu Jing originally didn't want to do this, but after thinking about it and under Honorable Elder Tong Chuan's persuasion, he finally agreed. But he only thought that Senior Tong Chuan was after the position of Patriarch and Holy Son. Who would have thought that he was actually someone from the Black Demon Cave? In the end he was also wronged. However, Rong Xiu had already turned his gaze slightly and looked toward 36 respected Elder Ming. I still need to see the Patriarch. I'll leave these matters to you. 36 respected Elder Ming nodded. Rest assured, Your Highness. After Rong Xiu finished speaking, he lifted his foot and walked outside. Honored Elder Yu Jing still wanted to beg, but he was intimidated by 36 Honored Elder Ming's gaze, and his entire body trembled. He shut his mouth. The room was silent. Everyone's eyes were still unconsciously following Rong Xiu. When he reached the door, he suddenly stopped in his tracks, half turned around, raised his eyebrows and chuckled. From today onwards, you don't have to worry about the Patriarch. Many people's faces alternated between red and white. In the end, they responded in unison and bowed respectfully. Yes. After Rong Xiu left, the room was still silent for a long time. Today's battle was really too thrilling. Thinking about it carefully, many people secretly felt miserable. With Rong Xiu's thoughts and methods, if he wanted to deal with them, it was really too easy. To think that they were actually naive enough to think that they could fight against him. It seemed that the best choice in the future was to obediently listen to all his orders. 36 respected Elder Ming looked around and laughed. Everyone, it's time for us to settle the score today, right? When Rong Xiu walked out of the main hall, Yan Qing, who was waiting outside, hurriedly came forward to welcome him. Your Highness, UMO sent news that the matter is almost settled. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. He's really fast. Your Highness has already arranged everything before, so it's natural that you're quick to pull in the net. Rong Xiu glanced at him and smiled. Your acting skills have also improved. A rare look of embarrassment appeared on Yan Qing's iceberg-like face. Your Highness, you flatter me. These are all what I should do. Rong Xiu kindly let him off and did not continue to tease him. He moved his feet and headed in the direction of Duming Peak. Is the Patriarch awake? Not yet, Your Highness. Rong Xiu's expression was indifferent. It's indeed a little troublesome to deal with that seal. Although he himself had escaped a calamity back then, it did not mean that he could easily break it. This seal was considered one of the top secret techniques of the Black Demon Cave, and there were very few people who knew about it. If he wanted to completely solve it, he was afraid that it would take some effort. Your Highness, about the princess consort. Yan Qing spoke hesitantly. Since the trouble here has been solved, you should be able to ask the princess consort to come back, right? Rong Xiu's thin crimson lips curled up slightly, and his eyes softened. When this matter is over, I will personally go to the Phoenix God Mountain to pick her up. Previously, he pretended to rush back to the Yuntian Tower and did not tell her the truth. In fact, he wanted to take care of these things before bringing her back. The crimson gold heavenly phoenix was enough for her to worry about. Yan Qing was taken aback, but immediately returned to normal and responded respectfully. As they spoke, the two had already reached the top of Duming Peak. Rong Xiu flew down and landed on a black jade stone. The soldiers in charge of guarding around saluted in unison. Greetings, Your Highness. He did not know if it was an illusion, but the iron-blooded aura on their bodies today seemed to be stronger than before. Rong Xiu gently nodded and walked toward the sacrificial god temple. Yan Qing followed closely behind. Wherever he passed, all the soldiers knelt on one knee to welcome him. They all knew that the Yuntian Tower, which looked calm on the surface, had set off a bloody storm again. Rong Xiu walked to the door of the sacrificial god temple and suddenly stopped. By the way, how are the preparations for the wedding going? Yan Qing immediately replied respectfully. Your Highness, it is basically ready. The preparations began a few years ago, and a lot of manpower and material resources of the Yuntian Tower were used. How could it not be ready? Rong Xiu nodded, and there seemed to be a stream of light flashing through his phoenix eyes. When I bring her back, we can choose a good day for the wedding. Digression. Today's February was sealed by the cold, so it was even more early. I will make it up tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1608. As the sun rose, the dark sky gradually brightened. The last light in the Phoenix Shrine quietly went out. A gentle breeze blew, and the white mist slowly dissipated, revealing the figures of the people sitting quietly in the plaza. Chu Luiyue exhaled slowly and opened her eyes. The energy of heaven and earth here was abundant and pure. Cultivating here was almost twice as effective as cultivating outside. Therefore, when she was waiting for Tuanzi outside the door, she didn't waste any time and divided part of her mind to cultivate. After breaking through to High God, her efficiency in absorbing origin power had increased significantly. Naturally, her cultivation speed had increased as well. There were a total of 3 stages in High God: early stage, middle stage, and peak stage. The difference between these 3 stages was not small. Currently, she was only at the early stage. If she wanted to continue breaking through, she would have to work hard. After the refinement of the pure origin power, her spirit had recovered significantly. Her pair of jade-like eyes were sparkling. She glanced at the entrance of the Phoenix Shrine. Dumpling had already been in there for 3 days, but there were still no signs of her coming out. Yi Zhao was accompanying her inside, so of course he had not come out. Chu Luiyue hesitated for a moment, but still looked to the side. Elder Yu had left yesterday. It seemed that his subordinates had discovered that Fenghuang Valley was severely damaged and had asked him to return to take a look. It made sense. In the past month, she could not remember how many Tianlei she had triggered. Although these Tianlei had been absorbed by Dumpling, the energy fluctuations in the process had still affected Fenghuang Valley. Chu Luiyue felt a rare sense of guilt. She wanted to go with him. However, Elder Yu waved his hand and told her to continue waiting for Dumpling. As for the rest, she could leave it to them. This was their territory anyway. When it came to repairing it, Chu Luiyue did not know as much as they did. In the face of Chu Luiyue's apology, Elder Yu's attitude became even more carefree. You've already helped Dumpling open her 4th meridian, what's this small matter? Dumpling's significance to the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan was immeasurable. Even if Fenghuang Valley was destroyed, they would have nothing to say. Fenghuang Valley could be rebuilt, but there might not be a second Dumpling. Since the other party said so, Chu Luiyue did not insist. After the first day, Elder Yi Gong never appeared again. Thus, at this moment, there were 3 other elders waiting outside the palace. Chu Luiyue looked at Elder Yi Shang, who was the closest to him. Elder Yi Shang, pardon me for asking, but does the ancestral worship always take so long? Elder Yi Shang looked back and smiled gently. Under normal circumstances, the young lord only needs 1 day to worship the ancestors. But Dumpling is a little special. It's normal for her to take a little longer. Chu Luiyue pursed her lips. Of course she was clear on this point, but it had already been 3 days and there was no movement at all. This made her feel nervous. Then, do you know how long it will take? Elder Yi Shang shook his head. This depends on her. Although there had been pure-blooded members of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan in the past, no one had ever summoned the ancestral spirit. This was Dumpling's first time. They did not have much experience, so they did not say much. Chu Luiyue nodded in understanding and could only continue waiting patiently. Luckily, she and Dumpling could sense each other. She felt that there should be no problem. Suddenly, Chu Luiyue felt a slight fluctuation in her energy center. Her expression froze. Moments later, the fluctuation came again, and this time, it was clearly bigger than the first time. It came from that water droplet. In the unseen world, there seemed to be something vaguely summoning. Chu Luiyue raised her eyes and looked in the direction of the summoning. She immediately held her breath. This power seemed to be coming from the Phoenix Shrine. She looked around her. Everyone's expression was normal, and there seemed to be no difference. This power seemed to be summoning only her? Chu Luiyue's eyebrows twitched. She could feel that this summoning power was extremely vast and powerful, with an astonishing pressure that could not be defied. Even Yi Zhao from before couldn't be compared to him. It was just that this power was very gentle to her, so although it fell on her body, it did not make her feel uncomfortable. In an instant, a ridiculous and bold guess flashed through Chu Luiyue's mind. Who else could possess such summoning power other than the ancestors of the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix clan who had been worshipped by the Phoenix Divine Hall for generations? But she was the only human here, and the only connection between her and the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix was Dumpling. How could? Suddenly, Chu Luiyue's thoughts came to a decision. Could it be because of Dumpling? Gradually, the fluctuation became stronger and stronger, and Chu Luiyue could no longer ignore it. Finally, before Chu Luiyue took the initiative to speak, the door of the Phoenix Shrine suddenly opened. Creak! This long and vicissitude sound was particularly clear in the quiet square. Everyone raised their heads and looked in the direction of the door. The expressions of Yi Shang and the others turned solemn. It seemed that the clan leader and Dumpling were about to come out. Yi Zhao's figure quickly appeared behind the door. He lifted his foot and stepped out of the door. Everyone bowed respectfully. Greetings, clan leader. Many people breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that the ancestral worship inside was finally over. However, there were some more observant people who quickly realized that Dumpling did not follow them out. Logically speaking, the two of them should have come out together. Yi Zhao's gaze fell directly on Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue seemed to have sensed something and looked up. The two of them looked at each other. Chu Luiyue could clearly see the complicated emotions surging in Yi Zhao's eyes. Then he heard Yi Zhao say, "Shangguanyu, you go in." These few simple words stunned everyone on the spot. Some even rubbed their ears, thinking that they were hallucinating. Some looked at each other, and from the shock in each other's eyes, they confirmed the clan leader's words. Yi Shang and the others were also stunned. Although Shangguanyu had entered the Phoenix Shrine twice before, it was under special circumstances. But it was different now. Dumpling was inside worshipping her ancestors. Why was Shangguanyu suddenly asked to go in at this time? However, when they saw Yi Zhao's serious expression, they did not dare to ask too much. They subconsciously looked at Chu Luiyue. As expected, Chu Luiyue calmed down, nodded slightly, and walked directly to the main hall. Everyone's eyes unconsciously followed her movements. When she brushed past Yi Zhao, Chu Luiyue could clearly feel that Yi Zhao was sizing her up. The look in his eyes was different from his usual expression. Although he looked calm on the surface, it was obvious that the waves in his heart had not calmed down. Chu Luiyue paused for a moment, then continued to walk into the Phoenix Shrine without looking sideways. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1609. The door slowly closed, completely blocking Chu Luiyue's figure and blocking everyone's sight, including Yi Zhao. After being stunned for a while, Yi Shang couldn't help but ask, "Clan leader, you aren't going in with us?" Yi Zhao nodded expressionlessly. This reaction was really hard to fathom. Elder Yi Shang frowned. This was obviously not the clan leader's intention. No matter how much he doted on Dumpling, he wouldn't summon Shangguanyu into the Phoenix Temple at this time. Unless this was the ancestor's intention. Other than that, no one else in the entire clan could be above the clan leader. Elder Yi Shang was speechless and didn't know how to react. The ancestor of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan had fallen tens of thousands of years ago during the sacrifice to the heavens. Only a remnant of his consciousness remained in the Phoenix Temple. In the long years, this consciousness had basically been in a deep sleep. This consciousness would only awaken when every generation of patriarch worshipped their ancestors. However, it would often continue to fall into a deep sleep after the sacrifice. But now, this consciousness actually woke up when Dumpling worshipped the ancestors, and it even allowed Shangguanyu to enter. How could this not be shocking? Elder Yi Jiao asked worriedly. The clan leader, is Dumpling doing well? Could something have happened to her? Yi Zhao nodded. Everything is normal inside, don't worry. Since the ancestor's consciousness had awakened, there was naturally a reason. At first, when he realized the ancestor's intention, he was also shocked, but now he had chosen to accept it. Perhaps it was because of the contract between her and Dumpling. Yi Zhao didn't say anything else. He just stood outside the door with his hands behind his back and waited quietly. No one dared to ask any more and could only continue to wait. Countless people had the same question in their minds. Shangguanyu, a human, entered the Phoenix Temple during the sacrifice to the ancestors. How should this be counted? Hearing the sound of the door closing, Chu Luiyue turned around to take a look. Yi Zhao didn't follow in, but the summoning wave in her dantian was getting stronger. This wave drove her forward. Although she had been here twice before, she had been in a hurry. She hadn't had the chance to properly size up the most sacred place of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. On the black jade slab, her figure was clearly reflected, as well as the specks of starlight above the dome. Although the sky was already bright, it still couldn't hide the bright light. Walking here would often give people the illusion that they were taking a stroll in the night sky full of stars. Chu Luiyue walked through the hall and crossed the threshold. She could clearly feel that the ripples in her body had become stronger. The summoning force seemed to be not far. She calmed herself down and continued to walk inside. This place was clearly not a place where ordinary people could enter. Chu Luiyue thought as he walked. Among the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix clan, those who could enter here could probably be counted on one's fingers. And she actually came in at this time. The deeper he went, the more intense the fluctuations in Chu Liyue's dantian became, and his heart beat faster and faster. But the miraculous thing was that in such an unknown situation, she didn't have the slightest bit of worry in her heart. She didn't know if it was because the power that summoned her was too gentle, or because she knew that Dumpling was also here, so she felt at ease. After walking for another quarter of an hour, Chu Liyue came to another door. She stood in front of the door and stared at it. A clear thought flashed through her mind. This was the place. She took a deep breath and raised her arm. Just as she was about to push the door opened by itself. Chu Liyue pressed her lips against each other as she stepped in. There was a universe within the great hall. Chu Liyue walked in and saw Dumpling standing in the middle of the great hall. Hearing the sound, Dumpling turned around. Seeing that it was Chu Liyue, she immediately ran over happily, opened her two chubby arms, and threw herself into her arms. "Ah, you." Hearing her clear and happy voice, Chu Liyue was immediately relieved. She smiled and bent down, picking her up. A ball of softness. "Ah, you're finally here." Dumpling wrapped her arms around her neck and rubbed her cheeks happily. Chu Liyue's brows moved slightly. "You knew I was coming?" "Yes. Ancestor said that he wanted to see you, so I waited for you." Only then did Chu Liyue raise her eyes. The great hall was somewhat empty, and there was no sound at all. It was very quiet. The ground was still paved with black jade, but above the dome there were no longer specks of light. Instead there were balls of crimson gold flames. In the deepest part, on the wall in front of her, there was a huge painting. In the thick flames, a crimson gold sky phoenix spread its wings and soared into the sky with a shocking aura. This painting was very realistic. The feathers on the crimson gold sky phoenix were almost completely visible, as if it would rush out of the painting in the next moment. Only the place where the eyes should be was empty, as if something was missing. However, Chu Liyue only took a glance, and she felt the force in her body faintly boil. The water droplet in her dantian also started to slowly rotate unconsciously. Chu Liyue was secretly shocked. This must be the ancestor of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. She was about to control the water droplet to stop moving when she suddenly heard an old and distant voice. "You are Dumpling's contracted master." That voice came from the mural, as if it had flowed through thousands of years of wind and frost. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. She put Dumpling down, cupped her fists and bowed respectfully. "Junior Shangguan, you greet Senior. No need to be so polite." That voice seemed to have a hint of a gentle smile. "Dumpling has already told me everything between the two of you. You are indeed very good to her." Chu Liyue heaved a sigh of relief in her heart. From this tone, the other party seemed to like Dumpling very much, and even his attitude towards her was much better. "I let you in today because I want to see what kind of person can make Dumpling so dependent and close to him, and even be willing to give up the position of clan leader." Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat and she asked warily, "Senior also wants me to break the contract with Dumpling?" "Of course not." The other party smiled. "You don't have to be nervous. Since I gave the Taoist soul to Tuanzi before, I won't care about this. No matter what, the position of clan leader will be hers in the future." Only then did Chu Liyue feel relieved. She said with some embarrassment, "This junior misunderstood. Please don't take it to heart. Yi Zhao and the others were quite rude to you before, so it's normal for you to be like this. But if there's anything rude, I hope you can let it go." Hearing this, Chu Liyue suddenly had a very subtle feeling in her heart. This ancestor of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan seems to be a little too polite to her. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1610. As an ancient divine beast, the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan had always been very arrogant. This was especially so in front of humans. And this was the ancestor of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix. Speaking of which, it was not an exaggeration to say that she had the status of a supreme being. Although this was only a remnant consciousness, the other party's identity was still full of deterrence. Even if she had a contract with Dumpling, the other party didn't seem to have to give her face like this, right? Countless thoughts flashed through Chu Liyue's mind, but her expression was normal as she said with a smile, "You're too polite. Dumpling has been with me for many years and we've gone through life and death together countless times. We're already as close as family. I know that what clan leader Yi Zhao and the others did was for the good of Dumpling. I'm more than happy and gratified." This was the truth. Chu Liyue admitted that her temper was not good. This time, the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan had done a lot of things. If it was in the past, she would definitely not tolerate it. However, she knew that in the end they were also doing it for Dumpling. Considering this point, she could ignore all those things. To her, all those things were not as important as Dumpling. As soon as she finished speaking, Chu Luiyue felt her legs go soft. She looked down and saw Dumpling hugging her thigh, looking at her with tears in her grape-like eyes. "Ayu," Dumpling called her name coquettishly and intimately, full of nostalgia and dependence. She knew that Ayu was the best to her. Chu Luiyue smiled and touched her head. "I have a question for you." That voice sounded again. Chu Luiyue nodded. "Senior, please speak." The other party paused for a moment before saying word by word, "Where did you get that thing in your body?" The hall fell into dead silence. The moment Chu Luiyue heard that sentence, she understood that it was referring to the water droplet in her dantian. She paused for a moment. She knew that there was no need for her to play dumb at this time. This junior accidentally obtained it a few years ago. "Oh?" The other party seemed a little surprised. "Then you didn't go and look for the rest of them in the past few years?" Chu Luiyue suddenly looked up. 10,000 miles away. The islands were scattered and the mountain ranges were continuous. This was the territory of the great phoenix dragon race. The tallest mountain peak in the center was even more majestic. All of a sudden, a furious dragon roar came from a cave halfway up the mountain. His aura shook the heavens, causing many great phoenix dragons to look over in shock. "What's going on?" Judging from his voice, it seems to be Elder Mao Yao. "Oh, looks like Elder Mao Yao has almost fully recovered." There was a hint of mockery in the voice. "It must have been tough for you to recuperate for so long." Lower your voice. "If someone hears it and reports it to Elder Mao Yao, you'll have to bear the consequences. Don't forget what happened to those who followed him to Lingxiao College." "Tisk, is there a need for that? I didn't say anything, did I?" "At most, I'm just concerned about Elder Mao Yao's health. Moreover, it is not just us. There are quite a number of elders in the clan who are criticizing Elder Mao Yao." This was a tactful way of saying it. Ever since Mao Yao had brought people to the Spiritual Firmament Academy with the intention of finding trouble with Shangguan Yu and Shangguan Jing, the Great Void Phoenix Dragon Tribe's attitude towards Mao Yao had changed greatly after that. He was a dignified elder with a noble status and extraordinary strength. Originally, he went to settle the score with them and brought back the corpse. But in the end, not only did he come back with injuries all over his body, but he even allowed them to take the corpse as their own. The entire Great Void Phoenix Dragon Tribe had been utterly humiliated. How could they not have any resentment in their hearts? However, due to Mao Yao's status as an elder and the fact that he was injured when he came back, the patriarch did not punish him. But in private, everyone in the race was already very dissatisfied with Mao Yao. Even when they heard his voice, they felt extremely annoyed. "Let's talk less. Even if we really want to punish him, it's the patriarch and the other elders' business. It's not up to us to speak. I'd like to see how Elder Mao Yao plans to make up for this matter." "That's enough. It's useless to be angry now. You've just recovered, so don't be so irritable." In the cave, a tall and burly figure stood with his hands behind his back. He looked to be about 50 years old. His appearance was ordinary, but he was hale and hearty. His hair was purple and gold, and his deep eyes seemed to be all-encompassing. They were as deep as a cold lake that could not be explored. This person was the patriarch of the Great Phoenix Dragon race, Mao Yang. In front of him was a huge Great Phoenix Dragon. It was obvious that it had been injured. Although its wounds had mostly healed, the newly grown scales were still particularly eye-catching. Mao Yang's eyes were filled with resentment. These were all the scales that he had plucked out from his damaged scales and regrown them. No one else could understand the pain he had gone through. "Does that mean that Shangguan Yu survived that disaster unscathed?" Mao Yang said. "Not exactly unscathed. I heard that she was bedridden for almost a month. Then she's still alive," Mao Yang said angrily. "She's really lucky. Something so big had happened in the Spiritual Firmament Academy, and Shangguan Yu had put herself in danger, but she had managed to survive." Mao Yang narrowed his eyes. He did not agree with Mao Yang's words. "I think that Shangguan Yu relied on more than just luck. After all, she personally repaired Lingxiao College's Sky Shuttle array. How could an ordinary person do that? Either she has a trump card or someone helped her. But no matter what, it proves that she's not simple. In that case, it was reasonable for her to be able to win against Mao Yao in that bet." "You were too careless previously," Mao Yang said bluntly. Mao Yao was speechless. In fact, he had already realized this point, but he was unwilling to admit it. So what if he admitted it? The result was already decided. Bah! He swung his long tail, and the hard dragon scales scraped against the mountain wall. Next time, I won't let her have it easy, Mao Yang suddenly said. Do you still remember that about a month ago, Yi Zhao personally wrote a letter to Lingxiao College's dean, Nan Suhuai, asking Shang Guanyu to go to Phoenix Mountain? Of course. Mao Yao gritted his teeth. He had deliberately spread the news that Shang Guanyu had formed a contract with the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix. In the end, Yi Zhao and the others acted quickly. What? Is there a result now? Mao Yang paused. Not really. It's just that Shang Guanyu hasn't come out of Phoenix Mountain yet. The Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan's ancestral worship ceremony will be held during this period. Digression. I'm going out for a while. I'll continue at 6 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from love. Chapter 1611. How could the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan allow a human to stay in Phoenix Godly Mountain during such an important occasion? Something was obviously wrong. You mean? Mao Yao was delighted at first, but then he hesitated. But that's not very likely. Shang Guanyu has a high status in the human race. If the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan really went overboard with her, then I'm afraid the human race won't agree. Mao Yang nodded. That's what I find strange. According to his speculation, Yi Zhao and the others should directly ask Shang Guanyu to terminate the contract with the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix. Due to various considerations, they shouldn't really want to kill Shang Guanyu. It wasn't difficult to solve this problem, and it wouldn't take more than a month. After all, their ancestral worshipping ceremony was still in progress. Shang Guanyu was still there. Could it be that she was also participating in the ancestral worshipping ceremony? That was too ridiculous. Shang Guanjing has been waiting outside Phoenix Godly Mountain. He didn't follow them in. Mao Yang lowered his eyes and pondered for a moment. Our people can't get too close. That's all we can find out. The two ancient divine beast clans had always been in a subtle competitive relationship. They paid special attention to each other's every move. However, there was also an unspoken rule between them. They would never step into each other's territory. Moreover, the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan was holding their ancestral worshipping ceremony. Naturally, their people would be more careful. Therefore, this was the only information that could be found. If Shang Guanyu is still waiting, it means that nothing has happened to her. Mao Yao was frustrated. What are Yi Zhao and the others doing? No matter what they are planning, the dignity of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan cannot be challenged. This time, Shang Guanyu will definitely terminate the contract with the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix. As for the legendary three-eyed eagle, I don't know what they will do with it. Speaking of this, Mao Yao's expression changed slightly, and then he sneered. I almost forgot about it if clan leader didn't mention it. How proud was Yi Zhao? Their clansmen had formed a contract with a human, and they were even working together with a legendary three-eyed eagle. This was simply a great humiliation. In my opinion, he will definitely kill that legendary three-eyed eagle as well. Mao Yang nodded thoughtfully. If that's the case, that would be great. After that, our clan can find an opportunity to bring the corpse back. Only then could he regain the face that he had lost previously. Forget it, let's wait a little longer. Mao Yang shook his head. As long as there were no accidents, things would basically go according to their expectations. Rest well. With that, Mao Yang turned around intending to leave. Patriarch. Mao Yao quickly called out to him. Mao Yang stopped moving and turned his head around. What is it? Seeing his reaction, Mao Yao felt a little awkward. My body has almost recovered. I can handle the matters of the Thousand Peaks Summit. The so-called Thousand Summit was one of the grandest events of the Great Phoenix Dragon Tribe. It was mainly to test the younger generation of the tribe and select a portion to enter the ancestral sacred ground for training. According to their results, they would also receive different cultivation resources. Those who could stand out would have the hope of inheriting the position of elder or even the position of patriarch. In the past, Mao Yao had always been in charge of this. Mao Yang's expression was a little strange. He smiled. Mao Ji and the others are handling the Thousand Peaks Summit, and they are basically done with the preparations. You don't have to worry. Just focus on recuperating. Mao Yao's heart sank, but he saw that Mao Yang had already turned around and left. Did he take away his authority? His eyes abruptly burst into a frenzied rage. It was filled with a deep hatred. If it wasn't for Shang Guanyu, how could all of this have happened? Mao Yang walked out of the cave and looked back. There was silence. With Mao Yao's temper, it was rare for him to be able to endure so much. Mao Yang's expression was indifferent. He didn't stay for long. His body moved and instantly disappeared. Phoenix Shrine. There was dead silence in the main hall. Chu Luiyue could clearly hear the sound of her heart beating. She raised her head slightly and stared at the mural in front of her despite the shocking pressure. There seemed to be waves surging in her black eyes. In fact, the other party's words had already set off stormy waves in her heart. Dumpling sensed that the atmosphere was a little wrong and nervously hugged Chu Luiyue's leg. This made Chu Luiyue come back to her senses. She took a deep breath and paused for a moment before saying, You know about this thing? For some reason, her throat was a little dry, and her voice sounded a little hoarse. You don't have to be nervous. I'm not fighting with you for this thing. The other party smiled with a hint of regret. With your status and strength, it's rare for you to be able to hide it until today. The voice and tone were very sincere, but Chu Luiyue's heart was still hanging. She didn't dare to let it go easily. She pursed her lips and gave a short answer. Thank you for your praise, senior. This junior doesn't deserve it. She paused for a moment before answering the other party's previous question. This junior's ability is not enough. It's already very difficult to keep this. I don't dare to hope to find the other. This is your luck. What's there to hope for? Besides, you're willing to exchange 2 lives for it. Quite brave. Chu Luiyue's hands slowly clenched and her whole body tensed up. She was just standing here, but the other party had already seen through her thoroughly. Any lies and cover-ups seemed particularly weak at this time. Since it has recognized you as its master, it's your mission to find the remaining parts. As the voice fell, a ball of reddish-gold flames suddenly flew out of the mural. It went straight for Chu Luiyue. Whoosh! The sound of something breaking through the air was heard. A golden light flashed in front of Chu Luiyue's eyes. At this moment she almost subconsciously wanted to retreat. However, at the same time, an ethereal voice sounded in her mind. She couldn't hear what the voice was saying, but she knew what it meant. Therefore, she held her breath and ordered herself to stand still. The ball of flame flew in front of Chu Luiyue in an instant. It was only a distance of a fist. The blazing temperature almost made the strands of hair in front of Chu Luiyue's forehead burn. Her face was boiling hot, and her eyes reflected the resplendent flames. Suddenly, there seemed to be an invisible hand that pulled Dumpling to the side. Dumpling struggled and refused to let go. Unfortunately, this little bit of strength was not enough in front of the ancestor. Boom! With a loud explosion, the ball of flame suddenly exploded. It turned into countless sparks and fell around Chu Luiyue's body. Those flames directly passed through her clothes in the blink of an eye and drilled into her body. The intense burning sensation instantly engulfed her entire body. Ugh! Chu Luiyue groaned and almost fainted from the intense and terrible pain. However, at the same time, a stream of light suddenly flashed in between her eyebrows. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 16:12. The moment the light flashed, the scorching temperature made Chu Luiyue subconsciously raise her hand to wipe it away. The space between her brows was smooth and flat. However, the feeling of being burned just wouldn't go away no matter how hard he tried. Chu Luiyue's entire body was engulfed by the crazy pain, but it was nothing compared to the pain between her brows. All of her attention was focused on the space between her eyebrows. Bang! Her legs went weak and she knelt on one knee on the ground. "Ayu!" Dumpling shouted worriedly as tears welled up in her eyes. She waved her small hands and struggled with all her might to rush over. However, the ancestor's strength was too strong. He trapped her on the spot and she could only watch from afar. "Ayu!" Dumpling's voice was choked with sobs. She couldn't bear to see Ayu suffer, especially surrounded by flames. Looking at the burning flames, the scene from back then kept flashing in her mind. Back then, there was also a fire in the royal ancestral hall in Tianling that took Ayu's life and separated them. When a similar scene played out again, it was naturally a huge blow to Dumpling. She'll be fine. Looking at Dumpling's teary and sad appearance, the ancestor couldn't help but sigh. If I kill her now, wouldn't I be killing you? It wasn't easy for it to wait for such a Dumpling, so it naturally couldn't bear to do that. Dumpling looked over in a daze. Really? But Ayu looked like she was in pain. Don't worry, why would I lie to you? Dumpling was still young, and the ancestor knew that she only had Shangguan Yu in her heart. It was useless to say anything else, so he could only persuade her like this. Dumpling wiped her tears and pursed her lips to hold back her sobs. If anything happens to Ayu, I don't want the position of young master or the clan leader anymore. Regardless of life and death, she would follow Ayu. About half an hour later, all the burning flames entered Chu Liyue's body. Her tendons, bones, blood, and flesh seemed to have been enveloped by the scorching heat. Draw the power of these flames into your dantian. That ancient and distant voice sounded again. Chu Liyue gritted his teeth and forced himself to stand up. Her movements were very slow, and every time she moved, the pain in her body seemed to increase. When she finally managed to sit cross-legged, her vision had already turned black, and she could barely see anything clearly. Afterward, she took a deep breath and placed her hands on her knees, circulating the origin power in her body with great difficulty. Those flames were like a flood, crazily surging all over her body, rampaging everywhere. The pressure it contained was so strong that Chu Liyue almost couldn't control it. He could only grit his teeth and use all his strength to slowly draw it into his dantian. Sizzle, a tiny flame touched her yuan meridian, and Chu Liyue could clearly hear an ear-piercing burning sound. This kind of bone-deep pain was indescribable. Chu Liyue's face instantly turned pale. She closed her eyes, frowned, and relied on her willpower to hold on. She didn't make a sound, and only her slightly trembling body showed the pain she was experiencing. After the first fireball landed, the second fireball quickly followed, landing not far away from the first one. Chu Liyue's body suddenly trembled, and the smell of rust spread between her lips and teeth. Afterward, those flames scattered freely on Chu Liyue's yuan meridian, and the area between her eyebrows became even hotter. Actually, this wasn't the first time Chu Liyue felt this kind of feeling. Previously, when she rushed out of the spring in Thousand Wine Mountain and summoned the divine realm back, the area between her eyebrows also hurt faintly. It was just that the situation was critical at that time, and she didn't pay attention to it. After the great calamity, she was unconscious for a month. When she woke up again, she completely threw this matter to the back of her mind. Until now, that kind of pain was hard to describe. It was like an extremely sharp knife with a scorching temperature was ruthlessly carving at the area between her eyebrows. Chu Liyue's physical strength had always been outstanding, and her tolerance for pain was even more extraordinary. To be able to torture her to such an extent, the pain and difficulty of the process could be imagined. Dumpling watched from not far away, and another string of tears fell. Poof! A slight cracking sound could be heard. It was a small hole that suddenly exploded on the back of Chu Liyue's hand. At a glance, it looked like an extremely sharp blade was used to quickly cut it open. There was no blood dripping down, but the wound was still scarlet red. Soon, more holes appeared on her body. Her originally white and jade-like skin started to become a ghastly sight at a speed visible to the naked eye. Dumpling's heart seemed to be squeezed into a ball by something, and her eyes were red. She almost didn't dare to look, but she also refused to look away. You. Time passed by slowly. In the blink of an eye, it was evening again. The brilliant afterglow scattered, and the entire Phoenix Shrine seemed to be plated with a layer of bright light. It's already been a day. Why hasn't Shangguan Yu come out yet? Elder Yishang didn't know how many times he had looked at the door, but he still didn't see any signs of it being opened. He walked to Yi Zhao's side worriedly. Clan leader, Yi Zhao shook his head. Everything that happens in the temple cannot be detected. I don't know the current situation either. How could he not want to know what it was like inside? Unfortunately, the ancestor had directly asked him to come out, and he didn't dare to disobey. Elder Yishang's lips moved. He wanted to say something, but in the end he didn't. Since the clan leader had said so, there was really no other way but to continue waiting. The fact that Shangguan Yu was allowed to enter was already shocking enough, and now she had stayed inside for so long. The longer this dragged on, the more uneasy it was. When Elder Yu returned, he saw that the plaza was strangely quiet. He subconsciously slowed down his footsteps. Clan leader. He already knew about what had happened. He only had time to return after settling the matters at Fenghuang Valley. Yi Zhao glanced at him. Is everything settled over there? Elder Yu smiled and nodded. Other than the few mountains nearby that were more severely damaged and took more time, the other areas are minor problems. After the ancestral worship ceremony, everyone's rest will not be affected. That's good. Only then did Elder Yi Zhao's expression soften slightly. Elder Yu glanced in the direction of the main hall. Seeing that they all had grave expressions, he smiled and said, That's right. Clan leader, I don't think you need to worry. Shangguan Yu is quite capable and she has a contract with Dumpling. There shouldn't be any accidents. She will be out soon. Yi Zhao knew that he was comforting him out of goodwill and nodded. I hope so. In the main hall, Chu Liyue sat quietly. At this moment, there were many small wounds on her body, and she was stained with blood. She looked very haggard. And in her body, the last spark had landed on her yuan meridian. There was a short silence. Bam. Following this soft sound, the sparks slowly formed into the shape of reddish-gold feathers on Chu Liyue's yuan meridian. Piece by piece, layer by layer. They completely covered her yuan meridian. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 16:13. A terrifying pressure was emitted from Chu Liyue's body. At the same time, the injuries on her body also began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. In a short while, her skin was as smooth as before. It was as if those injuries had never appeared. A layer of faint reddish-gold light enveloped her body, making her look powerful and sacred. Sensing the changes in her body, Dumpling was suddenly stunned. She did not care about crying anymore. She only opened her grape-like eyes wide and stared at Chu Liyue without blinking. Tears hung on her eyelashes, sparkling and translucent. It made one's heart ache. She and Chu Liyue had a contract. She could feel Chu Liyue's pain and could also feel the changes in her body immediately. Her aura seemed to have become stronger? No. To be precise, her yuan meridian had become stronger. That layer of power covered her yuan meridian, as if adding a layer of armor to her yuan meridian. The key was that this power came from the ancestor of the reddish-gold celestial phoenix. Even Dumpling, who had the purest bloodline now, could not be compared to it. Immediately after, Dumpling suddenly felt that the power that was suppressing her suddenly disappeared. Now, do you believe what I said just now? The ancestor's smiling voice sounded. Dumpling was stunned for a while before slowly regaining her senses. A bright smile immediately blossomed on his chubby little face. Ancestor is so good. As she spoke, she could not wait to take a step forward and quickly ran towards Chu Liyue. Soon she rushed in front of Chu Liyue. She finally stopped 3 steps away from Chu Liyue. Because Chu Liyue was still meditating and did not open her eyes. Although Dumpling wanted to immediately rush into her arms, she knew that the time was special now. Therefore, she obediently stood in place and waited. She only blinked her big eyes and looked at Chu Liyue from head to toe. The more she looked, the happier she became. Ayu's aura was indeed much stronger than before. Plus, this wasn't just a simple increase in strength. More importantly, it contained a shocking amount of pressure. Suddenly, Chu Liyue's eyebrows twitched. The next moment, she slowly opened her eyes. His eyes were like stars, bright and dazzling. A pure gold flame flashed through her eyes. Chu Liyue stared fixedly at Dumpling. There seemed to be thousands of stars twinkling in his eyes. She raised her hand. Dumpling's lotus leaf dress suddenly moved without any wind. Chu Liyue's fair and delicate finger tapped lightly. Something gushed out from her body and quickly gathered in her palm. It was a transparent ball of light the size of a fist. Inside there was a cluster of golden flames burning. Dumpling's eyes widened slightly. Inside is the heavenly Tao that appeared when she made a contract with Ayu? However, wasn't the heavenly energy supposed to be illusory and formless? Why did it suddenly transform into flames? Could it be because of the ancestors' help? Tuanzi was at a loss. Chu Liyue suddenly spoke. Dumpling, come here. Her voice was gentle and pleasant, but it carried a hint of pressure that made people submit unconsciously. Dumpling hurriedly took 2 steps forward. Ayu, Chu Liyue's palm moved slightly, and the ball of light flew up lightly and floated quietly between the two of them. Then Chu Liyue looked up at the mural. Senior, sorry to trouble you. Dumpling was about to turn around when she saw a stream of light flash on the ball of light. In the blink of an eye, it condensed into a familiar pattern. It was the totem of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Dumpling blinked. She vaguely felt that her body seemed to have changed a little, but she didn't know why. Then, she saw Chu Liyue cross her hands in front of her and close her eyes again. The aura around her surged. Suddenly, a silver-red dot of light appeared in front of her. Gradually, more and more light spots appeared, like a sea of stars, and surrounded Chu Liyue. Chu Liyue summoned her own god realm. The atmosphere in the entire hall began to become more and more strange. The surrounding heaven and earth force also gradually surged toward Chu Liyue. Vaguely, there seemed to be the sound of surging waves. Although Dumpling didn't know what Chu Liyue was going to do, she could vaguely sense her seriousness. Therefore she also became nervous. Her 2 chubby little hands clenched tightly, and she stared at Chu Liyue without blinking, afraid that she would miss something. At this moment, she suddenly saw a stream of light flash between Chu Liyue's brows. Then, a second stream of light appeared and it connected with the first one. After that, a third stream of light appeared. Dumpling opened her mouth in surprise, and her small mouth formed a round O shape, because she suddenly realized that these streams of light seemed to be forming a pattern. As the number of streams of light between Chu Liyue's brows increased, the pressure on her body also rapidly increased. Gradually, even Dumpling felt that she was out of breath. The surrounding space seemed to be frozen by this invisible force. She looked at Chu Liyue with some uncertainty. She wanted to ask, but she was afraid that it would affect her, so she swallowed all those questions in the end. After an unknown period of time, the last stream of light finally landed between Chu Liyue's brows. In an instant, a brilliant light bloomed and it was dazzling. An incomparable divine aura suddenly descended upon them. Swoosh! Chu Liyue opened her eyes. It was clearly a pair of black and bright eyes, but at this moment, it seemed to contain countless stars. It reflected thousands of wheels and revolved. Digression, make up for yesterday, continue tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse and read for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 16:14. Chu Liyue raised her hand. Her fair palm waved gently, and a stream of light instantly appeared on the light ball. Soon, a totem exactly the same as the one on her forehead appeared on the transparent ball of light. At this point, the two totems each occupied half of the light ball. Dumpling seemed to be attracted by something as she unconsciously stared at the light ball. There seemed to be something tugging at the power in her body. Before Dumpling could identify it, she saw the two totems merge into the flames in the light ball. Instantly, the sound of something shattering came from the depths of her mind. Dumpling's eyes widened. The connection between her and Ayu was broken. However, just as she panicked and wanted to get up, the light ball suddenly split from the middle. It was as if an invisible knife had cut it evenly from the middle. The cut surface was neat and smooth, and the reddish-gold flames inside were also split into two halves. Then the two halves flew towards Chu Liyue and Dumpling respectively. Chu Liyue raised her hand and caught the half of the light ball. With a swoosh, the flames quickly burrowed into her palm. Into her body. Dumpling. Chu Liyue reminded her. Dumpling regained her senses and looked at the half of the light ball that flew in front of her. She hurriedly reached out with both hands to catch it. In the blink of an eye, the flames in the light ball also quickly disappeared into her chubby little hands. Ayu, Dumpling was about to say something when she suddenly froze. Because at this moment, she clearly felt that the subtle connection between them had been re-established. She could once again feel Ayu's aura and emotions. Everything happened too quickly, causing Dumpling's mind to be in a daze. Previously, she was nervous and terrified, but now that she had regained what she had lost, she was naturally happy and joyful. In just a few breaths' time, it was already ice and fire. At this moment, the totems between their brows flashed exceptionally brightly and quickly disappeared. Chu Liyue finally let out a heavy sigh when the boiling temperature between his eyebrows had completely disappeared. The huge rock that had been hanging in his heart finally fell at this moment. Finally, everything went smoothly. Looking at Dumpling in front of him, who was still in a daze, Chu Liyue's heart was filled with tenderness. He smiled and waved at Dumpling. Dumpling pass, bang. Before he could finish his sentence, Chu Liyue's vision blurred and Dumpling threw herself into his arms. Dumpling's impact was extremely strong. Chu Liyue was caught off guard and both of them fell backwards. Fortunately, at this moment, a gentle force supported Chu Liyue's waist, allowing her to barely stabilize her body. Regiment, woo woo woo. Before Chu Liyue could speak, Dumpling had already burst into tears. Chu Liyue's shoulders were quickly soaked. She immediately felt even more distressed. She hugged Dumpling in her arms and gently patted her back. All right. Isn't everything fine now? Dumpling cried until she was out of breath. Her voice was choked as she spoke intermittently. Well, I thought, Ayu didn't want me anymore. Chu Liyue knew that this matter had frightened her and felt very guilty. However, she had just awakened the totem at that time and really didn't have the time to explain in detail to Dumpling. I won't. Dumpling, have you forgotten what I said before? She had said that no matter what, she would not leave Dumpling alone. Since she had said so, she would naturally do so. Dumpling hugged Chu Liyue's neck tightly and her two short legs were firmly wrapped around Chu Liyue's body. She was firmly hanging on to Chu Liyue's body. It was as if she was afraid that Chu Liyue would leave again. Fortunately, with Chu Liyue's comfort, her crying gradually quieted down, leaving only her small body still twitching. But just now, Just now I was helping you change the contract, not canceling it. The vicissitude and distant voice sounded again. At this moment, Dumpling's emotions had calmed down a lot. When she heard this, she couldn't help but pause, turn her head and look back. Ancestor burp, this burp, what does this burp mean, burp? As she spoke she was still burping. At this moment she really looked very pathetic. Her pair of clear and beautiful big eyes were red. Her small and sharp nose was also red. Her chubby little face was full of tears. The ancestor sighed helplessly. Just now, the moment the contract was broken, Tuanzi cried like this. If the contract between her and Shangguanyu was cancelled completely, no one knew what she would do. Fortunately Yi Zhao and the rest didn't do anything rash. Otherwise, you and Shangguanyu signed a master-servant contract previously. When she heard this, Dumpling's face was filled with confusion. That's right, what else could it be? Wasn't there only one contract between magical beasts and humans? Why did they suddenly say that it was a master-servant contract? The ancestor seemed to have seen through her confusion and continued to explain. Actually, there are two types of contracts in this world. One is the master-servant contract, which is also the most common contract in the mainland. The other is the life-binding contract. The difference between a master-servant contract and a magical beast is that the relationship between them is equal. Once a master-servant contract is signed, the life of the magical beast is closely linked to its master. If the master dies, the magical beast will die. However, a contract with the same name does not have this restriction. However, this is not the most important feature of a life-binding contract. After a life-binding contract is signed, the human and the magical beast breathe together and share the same fate. If one of them dies, as long as the other is still alive, it will preserve the other's life. If there is a chance, it can even bring the other party back to life. The ancestor's voice reverberated throughout the hall. However, Tuanzi was already stunned. A life-binding contract? Although she had never heard of it before, from the ancestor's words, it seemed very powerful. Just now, I forcefully changed your master-servant contract to a contract with the same name. Although there is still a contract between the two of you, it will not be the same as before. From now on, your life and death will no longer depend entirely on Shangguanyu. In this way, Yi Zhao and the rest will not be able to use this contract to do anything to you. The ancestor paused. More importantly, in this way the two of you will have half an extra life. This was the most important thing. Status, strength, talent, these things all had the most basic prerequisite, being alive. Dumpling covered her mouth in shock and her eyes widened. So that's how it is. So the moment she lost contact with Ayu, it was because the ancestor was helping them? Happiness came too quickly and Dumpling was still a little dizzy for a moment. She could not help but turn her head and look at Chu Liwei blankly. Ayu, why didn't we make this contract directly in the past? Before Chu Liwei could say anything, the ancestor snorted. Naturally, it's because she doesn't know how to. However, this is normal. You have to know that in this world, there are no more than 3 people who can use a life-binding contract. One of them was this. Digression. Your February suddenly flashed, I'm really going to sleep. The update during the day is still at 12 o'clock. This is an extra update, not a single update. Moi *3, epsilon*. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 16-15. Dumpling's eyes widened. So, the ancestor was really that powerful? In that case, not only could she and Ayu still be together in the future, but they also didn't have to listen to the elders nagging anymore. Moreover, even if she and Ayu encountered any danger again, as long as one of them could escape, then both of them could still survive. This couldn't be better. Chu Liwei also sighed in her heart when she heard that. The life contract was indeed extraordinary. Originally she didn't know either. However, when the ancestor's power merged into her body and transformed into a feather, covering her Yuan meridian with a layer of extremely tough armor, she vaguely sensed something. There seemed to be a chanting sound coming from afar, driving the light ball to split into 2 and fuse together. Although the process was rather difficult, it was worth it. She stood up with Dumpling in her arms and bowed deeply to the crimson gold heavenly phoenix on the mural. I will never forget Senior's great kindness. Dumpling's watery eyes turned and she hurriedly shouted. Thank you, Ancestor. I knew Ancestor was the best to Dumpling. Although her voice was still a little hoarse, it was soft and cute. The ancestor snorted. Now you have a sweet mouth. You're not angry anymore? You're not making a fuss anymore? Dumpling's little face blushed and a big smile bloomed on her face. Ancestor is magnanimous and magnanimous. Why would you bicker with a child like me? Besides, you dote on me the most, don't you? Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to summon the ancestor's soul, and she wouldn't have been able to become the young master and enter this place, right? The ancestor couldn't help but laugh. You know how to talk. I wonder who you learned it from. There was no anger in his voice, only affection. Of course he doted on Dumpling. Otherwise, he wouldn't be willing to spend so much effort to help her change the contract. Shengguan Yu. I still have a few words to say to you. Chu Liuyue's expression was firm. Senior, please speak your mind. The hall fell into silence. After a long while, the ancestor said, Dumpling is the young mistress of our clan and the future successor of the clan leader. Now that she's still young, I'll have to trouble you to take care of her in many areas. The corners of Chu Liuyue's lips curved up slightly. Senior, you're being too polite. Even if the other party did not say these things, she would never let Dumpling suffer any grievances. You're willing to go to my clan alone for Dumpling. Of course I can trust you. The voice hesitated for a moment. If you go and look for the remaining ones, I'm afraid it will be very dangerous. Today I will change the contract between the two of you. This is the last thing I can do to help you. Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat, then he nodded solemnly. Junior understands Senior's intentions. The voice laughed and sighed softly. That thing's willingness to recognize you as its master has already proven a lot. You guys go ahead. I'm a little tired and want to rest. Towards the end, his voice was indeed tinged with a bit of exhaustion and gradually became softer. Chu Liuyue pursed her lips and put Dumpling down. She bowed respectfully. Senior, take care. Dumpling also bowed and said in a crisp voice. Goodbye, Ancestor. Dumpling will miss Ancestor every day. A low and distant chuckle could be heard, and then it gradually disappeared. After a while, Chu Liuyue held Dumpling's hand. Dumpling, let's go. Creak. The door of the Phoenix Shrine finally opened. Everyone who was waiting outside the main hall was invigorated when they heard the sound. They looked in the direction of the door. As the heavy and solemn door slowly opened, two figures, one tall and one short, appeared in front of everyone. They were Shengguan Yu and Dumpling, who had been in there for a few days. They're finally out. This thought flashed through countless people's minds. Yizhao took the lead and walked forward. His gaze fell on Dumpling first. Seeing Dumpling's red eyes and the tear stains on her fair and tender little round face, Yizhao's heart clenched. Dumpling, what's wrong with you? Why was she crying when worshipping the ancestors? He almost immediately frowned and looked at Chu Liuyue. Sensing his strict and scrutinizing gaze, Chu Liuyue didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She and Dumpling came out directly after bidding farewell to the ancestors. Dumpling had just finished crying and looked extremely pitiful. It was no wonder that Yizhao would suspect her when he saw her. Clan leader, I'm fine. Dumpling held Chu Liuyue's hand tightly. Knowing that the clan leader had misunderstood, she hurriedly explained. Yizhao, on the other hand, was still skeptical. Dumpling, this is the Phoenix Shrine, and you're the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. If you're really bullied, you must tell us, okay? Aya? I'm really fine. Dumpling mumbled. It's just that I finally got to talk to the ancestors and I'm so happy that I cried. Before coming out, she had already discussed with Ayu that they wouldn't tell anyone about the change in the contract for the time being. If Yizhao and the others knew about this now, they definitely wouldn't have any scruples about Chu Liuyue anymore. They might even ask Dumpling to stay in the Phoenix God Mountain. After signing the life contract, humans and magical beasts no longer had to stay together all the time. Magical beasts also didn't have to worry about dying because of humans. Yizhao and the others had always wanted Dumpling to stay. If they knew about this, there was no doubt that their reason would be even more valid. In any case, they had already promised not to get involved until Dumpling became an adult. It might be more appropriate to say it later. Yizhao carefully sized up Dumpling again. After confirming that she was really not injured, he finally relaxed. Then he said to Chu Liuyue, Miss Shangguan, if we offended you just now, please forgive us. Dumpling is our clan's young master after all, so we will naturally take care of her. Chu Liuyue raised her eyebrows slightly. How rare. Clan leader Yizhao was actually so polite to her. Could it be because she had made a trip to the Phoenix Shrine? Clan leader Yizhao, you're overthinking. I know that you're all doing this for Dumpling's sake. Chu Liuyue's principle had always been, if you respect me, I'll respect you tenfold. After all, Yizhao was the honorable clan leader of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. She was already very gratified that he could speak to her so calmly. In any case, it was much better than the beginning. Seeing Chu Liyue's smile, Yi Zhao's impression of her improved a little. It seemed like she really didn't take these things to heart. Although Shang Guanyu looked young, she knew her limits. She knew when to fight and when to give in. No wonder she was so famous among the humans. Yi Zhao paused for a moment before asking, "Did everything go smoothly during the ancestral worship?" As soon as he said this, everyone pricked up their ears. This was actually what they wanted to know the most. It was normal for Dumpling to worship her ancestors. The key was, what did Shang Guanyu do when she went in? What the hell is going on inside? Amidst the silence, Chu Liyue smiled brightly. "Of course. Senior is very nice. I feel very close to you. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network." Chapter 16:16. The huge square suddenly became even quieter. At this moment, even the wind seemed to have stopped flowing. Everyone's expression suddenly became extraordinarily interesting. What did Shang Guanyu just say? The ancestor was very kind and was very kind to her? Did that mean that she had really met the ancestor? And from the sound of it, the ancestor seemed to be very kind to her. She was a human after all. After a short period of dead silence, the square was finally in an uproar. She really met the ancestor. I've attended the ancestral worship hall twice, but I haven't seen him. I'm jealous. I've attended it 5 times but I haven't seen him either, right? Other than the clan leader and elders, everyone else has been treated the same no matter how many times they've been here. If you want to talk to the ancestor, you'll have to become an elder first. Alright, the young lord can do it too. The prerequisite is that you have to have the ability to do so. Obviously, no one present had the ability to do so. After all, the position of the young lord already belonged to the little person standing above. Damn it. The position of the young lord has been empty for hundreds of years. Just when it was about to be chosen, it was snatched away by a little girl who broke through halfway. She has the purest bloodline, so I won't say anything. There's no point in being envious. It's only right that she can go in to worship the ancestor. But who can tell me what's going on with Shang Guanyu? She's Dumpling's contractor. Even if it's for Dumpling's sake, it shouldn't be to this extent, right? What was the ancestor thinking? Yi Zhao and the others who had seen the world had very interesting expressions at this time. The remnant consciousness of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan's ancestor was usually in a deep sleep. It would only wake up during the ancestral worship ceremony. And the only people who could talk to it were the newly elected young lord or the clan leader. Even the 5 elders could only follow along to meet it at most. They never had the honor of being taught by the ancestor. But now, even a human was doing better than them. Although it was unbelievable, Yi Zhao and the others didn't think that Chu Liyue was lying. There was no need to lie about such matters, because it could be easily verified or refuted. This meant that the ancestor really treated her well. I wonder if Miss Shangguan can reveal a thing or two to me. Did the ancestor have any instructions? Yi Zhao took a deep breath and asked politely. Chu Liyue smiled. It's nothing much. What the ancestor meant was that Dumpling is still young, and he asked me to take care of her. She had said this sentence so casually, but in everyone's ears, it was like a sudden clap of thunder. Wasn't it obvious that he was going to let her take care of Dumpling? Since even the ancestors had said so, then what right did the others have to object? In fact, Yi Zhao had already vaguely guessed this before, but he didn't dare to believe it. Only now did he have no choice but to accept reality. Even though he didn't know what the ancestor was thinking when he made such a decision, there had to be a reason behind it. The only thing they could do was to obey. I see. Yi Zhao said dryly and fell silent. He had always been a man of few words. Now that he was in this situation, he didn't know what to say. Clan leader Yi Zhao, may I know if the ancestral worship ceremony has ended? Chu Liyue suddenly asked softly. Yi Zhao was stunned for a moment before he nodded. It's basically over. In fact, the most important thing in this ancestral worship ceremony was to evaluate the younger generation and choose one of them to be the young master. Dumpling wasn't originally in this range, but her talent and strength were too heaven-defying. Moreover, she had summoned the ancestor's soul and received the ancestor's favor. Of course, the position of the young master was hers. As for the others, they had already been tested on the first day. Yi Ran was the most promising one, so even if he was late, Yi Zhao didn't pursue the matter. Who knew that in the end, it could only be said that everything was predestined. Yi Zhao was relieved that he had high hopes for Dumpling. He didn't expect Dumpling to perform better than he had expected. Even though he couldn't break the contract between her and Shang Guanyu, but Since the ancestor had agreed, what else could they say? If that's the case, I think it's time for me to leave, Chu Luiyue said honestly. Even though it wasn't the right time to leave, she and Dumpling had been here for too long. Taizu was still waiting outside. In the academy, his master and various elders were also secretly worried. And Rong Xiu, she had come here to solve Dumpling's problem. Now that everything was done, it was time for them to leave. Yi Zhao frowned and looked at Dumpling. Dumpling was still holding Chu Luiyue's hand and standing next to her. Anyone with eyes could see her dependence and intimacy with the person next to her. Yi Zhao's lips moved. In fact, he was very reluctant to leave, but he naturally wouldn't say those words. After thinking for a moment, he finally nodded. You can come more often when you're free. These words came out of nowhere, but Chu Luiyue understood. This was an agreement. In the future she could freely enter Phoenix Mountain. Her red lips curled up into a bright smile. Thank you for your understanding, Patriarch. This is Dumpling's home. It will always belong here. Hearing this, the last trace of awkwardness in Yi Zhao's heart was finally relieved. He looked at Chu Luiyue deeply. If you need help in the future, just let me know. Chu Luiyue smiled and nodded. Thank you. The sun set in the west. The bright and warm afterglow shone on the clouds, plating them with a layer of golden light. Above the vast and boundless sea, the frozen ice reflected a faint glow. Sheng Wanjing stood on the shore and looked into the distance. Seeing that the scene had not changed at all compared to before, he couldn't help but sigh. Another day had passed. Hadn't returned yet. It had already been more than a month. He didn't know what the situation inside was like. Recalling the letter from before, Sheng Wanjing frowned slightly. The fact that Yu was able to ask the elder of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan to help send the news out was actually beyond his expectations. It was also because of this that he could continue to be patient and wait until now. However, Yu clearly said that she would be back soon. However, a long time had passed and he still didn't see her figure crack. In the distance, a crisp cracking sound suddenly sounded, interrupting Sheng Wanjing's thoughts. He looked in the direction of the sound and saw that the frozen layer of ice on the vast sea seemed to have suddenly cracked open. His heart skipped a beat. He hurriedly took 2 steps forward and looked intently. Soon, accompanied by a series of crackling sounds, the ice layer instantly seemed to be covered with spider webs. Under Sheng Wanjing's nervous gaze, finally, bang! All the ice layers completely shattered. At the same time, the pattern formed by the golden flames in the sky also began to gradually fade. Taizu. A familiar clear voice sounded. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 16-17. Sheng Wanjing suddenly looked up. A slender and exquisite figure suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Her figure was light as she walked over on the waves. The shattered floating ice reflected brilliant light and landed around her, as if she was enveloped in a layer of holy light. She was powerful and noble, almost making one unable to look straight at her. Sheng Wanjing was surprised and delighted. However, he saw a small figure following beside Chu Luiyue. It was a girl who looked to be no more than 3 or 4 years old. Her eyes were exquisite and cute. Her hair was tied up in 2 buns with a red string. They chased after golden bells and swayed with the wind, jingling. The wind blew over and swept up her shiny pure gold lotus leaf dress. It swayed and was very moving. Sheng Wanjing was a little confused. This is beautiful and cute, but why did you bring a child with her when she made a trip there? Just as he was filled with doubts, Chu Luiyue had already pulled Dumpling over the waves and landed a few steps in front of Sheng Wanjing. Only then did Sheng Wanjing come back to his senses and hurriedly go forward. How are you? Why did you go for so long? Are you injured? Were you bullied over there? Chu Luiyue didn't know whether to laugh or cry at the series of questions. Taizu, which one do you want me to talk about first? Only then did Sheng Wanjing realize that he had lost his composure and hurriedly coughed. Tell me slowly, tell me slowly. Chu Luiyue knew that he was like this because he was too nervous about her. Her heart warmed as she said with a smile, Don't worry, I'm not injured. Aren't I standing here perfectly fine? Besides, I didn't suffer any grievances inside. They were quite polite to me. Of course, that was after she threatened them with death. However, there was no need to tell Taizu about this in detail. In short, most of the time in Phoenix Mountain, the other party's attitude towards her was still all right. Sheng Wanjing didn't quite believe it. He grabbed her wrist and looked her up and down carefully. After confirming that she was really fine, he finally believed her. But at the same time this made him even more confused. The Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan's letter was very impolite. It was clear that it was aimed at you. She went, would they really not bully her? Chu Luiyue smiled. Taizu, don't worry. All the troubles and problems had been smoothly resolved. From now on you don't have to worry anymore. Really? Sheng Guanjing found it unbelievable, but looking at Chu Luiyue's appearance, it did not seem like he was lying. What exactly happened in the past month? He was momentarily at a loss for words, not knowing where to begin. He turned his gaze and saw the little girl by the side. At this moment, the little girl was tightly holding onto one of Chu Luiyue's hands. She looked up at him with her round, white and tender little face and her big, grape-like eyes. Sheng Guanjing's heart jumped. Why does this feel so familiar? Dumpling, greet him. Chu Luiyue touched Dumpling's head and said gently. Dumpling obediently took a step forward. A big smile bloomed on her face as she called out crisply. Hello, Grandpa Taizu. Sheng Guanjing was instantly shocked and looked at Chu Luiyue with his mouth agape. This is, Dumpling. Isn't this the name of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix that you contracted? You guessed right. Dumpling has transformed into a human. Chu Luiyue explained with a smile. Moreover, she is now the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Sheng Guanjing sucked in a cold breath. What exactly did this girl do when she went to the Phoenix God Mountain? Digression. Continue at 6 o'clock. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 16-18. After that, Chu Luiyue briefly told Taizu about what had happened in Phoenix God Mountain during this period of time. She didn't mention some of the details, including the change in the contract with Dumpling. Chu Luiyue had tried her best to keep a low profile, but what she said still shocked Sheng Guanjing on the spot, and he couldn't recover for a long time. Dumpling was the purest bloodline of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? You helped Dumpling open her fourth meridian? Dumpling was appointed as the young master at the ancestral worship ceremony? Even the arrogant clan leader Yi Zhao promised that Dumpling would live with you in the future and maintain the contract until she became an adult. Then she would make the choice herself? Each and every one of them was news that could shock the entire world if they were to be brought out. Now all of this had happened to one person? Their ancestral worship ceremony has ended, so I brought Dumpling back. As Chu Luiyue spoke, she saw Taizu's stunned expression. She couldn't help but stretch out her hand and wave it in front of Taizu. Taizu? Sheng Guanjing's eyes focused. He looked at her and then at Dumpling. No, nothing. I just felt a little surprised. Then he closed his eyes and pinched the space between his eyebrows. Chu Luiyue looked at Taizu with understanding. It was no wonder Taizu had such a reaction. For the past month, he had probably been imagining how she was bullied and suppressed in his mind every day. In the end, she only realized that her previous thoughts were completely wrong after she came out. It was normal for him to have a huge psychological impact. After a while, Taizu finally recovered. He opened his eyes and looked at Dumpling with a complicated gaze. So, you brought the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan with you just like that? Dumpling pulled Chu Luiyue's hand and looked at her uneasily. Could it be that Taizu found it too troublesome to bring her along? That's right, a lot of things had happened in the Phoenix God Mountain. If it wasn't for her, you wouldn't have had to go through all that. Chu Luiyue couldn't help but chuckle and poke her little head. How could the Taizu be unhappy? They were clearly in disbelief. Forming a contract with a Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix was already extremely rare, not to mention that she was a young master with a special identity. That's right. Dumpling had been with me for so many years. Although she had become the young mistress of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, she was still a child. Patriarch Yi Zhao and the others also felt that it would be better for Dumpling to follow me. Sheng Guanjing's expression was strange. They are willing to? Chu Luiyue blinked. She didn't know about other people, but clan leader Yi Zhao couldn't bear to part with her. But so what? Clan leader Yi Zhao dotes on Dumpling very much, and it's precisely because of this that he's willing to respect Dumpling's choice. Of course, he also said that he hopes that if I have time, I can bring Dumpling back to visit more often. Sheng Guanjing could understand every word, but when they were put together, he was a little confused. Did Yi Zhao really say this himself? He had always been extremely proud and disdained the human race. When Sheng Guanjing was waiting here, he had suspected more than once that Yi Zhao might even directly attack Yu. In the end, why was the development of the matter completely different from what he had imagined? But now the person was standing in front of him, so he had no choice but to believe it. That's pretty good, Shang Wanjing coughed and looked over Chu Liyue's shoulder at the sea behind her. The broken pieces of floating ice were rapidly melting. As the waves surged, scattered flames could be vaguely seen burning quietly. It was as if everything was starting to return to normal. For an instant he even felt that the past month or so was like a dream. Chu Liyue followed his gaze, half-turned, and looked into the distance. There was no trace of the divine Phoenix Mountain here. That oppressive might had also gradually dissipated. However, compared to when they had first arrived, their mental states had undergone an enormous change. Chu Liyue smiled. Taizu, let's... Suddenly her voice paused as if she had sensed something and she looked back. It was evening now, and the sun was gradually sinking below the sea level. A familiar fluctuation came from the sky that was dyed with a layer of warm gold. You are what's wrong? Sensing her expression, the great ancestor felt a little strange and turned back to take a look. Above the void, there were suddenly waves gradually rising. Then a tall and slender figure stepped out of it. It was a young man dressed in snow-white clothes, with golden cloud patterns embroidered on his sleeves and hem. Under the last ray of afterglow, he flickered with a faint glow. His appearance was enchanting, and the aura around him was indescribably noble. Just by standing there, he seemed to have the disdain and nobility to look down on all living things. Was Rongxiu? A question flashed through Shang Wanjing's mind. Why is he here? The divine Phoenix Mountain was extremely hidden, and even they found it under the guidance of Dumpling. Why did Rongxiu appear directly? As he thought about it, Rongxiu's figure moved and he headed over. In the blink of an eye, he was already in front of them. His eyes fell on Chu Liyue first. The two of them met eyes. This moment was more than 1,000 words. Then he bowed to Shang Wanjing first. Greetings, Senior Shangguan. Shang Wanjing helped him up and then asked, Rongxiu, why are you here all of a sudden? Rongxiu's thin scarlet lips curved slightly, and the surrounding scenery instantly faded. I'm here to take you and your back to the Yuntian Tower. Shang Wanjing paused. No, I mean, have you been here before? No. Rongxiu was very quick-witted. How could he not guess Shang Wanjing's doubts? He explained, I can come here because of the interspatial ring on Yuer's finger. Shang Wanjing suddenly understood. Yes, that was the most precious treasure of the Yuntian Tower. As the Holy Sun, Rongxiu could naturally sense the aura on it and find this place. Thinking about it, there were indeed several times before when Yuer was in danger, Rongxiu could always appear in time. It was just that this place had changed to the divine Phoenix Mountain. How's the situation of Patriarch Bailey Jun? Chu Liyue stepped forward and asked. Rongxiu's smile deepened. Don't worry, it's basically solved. It's just that it will take some time for Patriarch to wake up. Chu Liyue finally felt relieved, but then she was a little surprised. We're not going back to the academy? Master and the others should still be waiting. As if he knew what she was thinking, Rongxiu nodded gently. I've already sent a message to the academy, telling them that I will personally come to take you back to the Yuntian Tower. Chu Liyue was stunned. There was nothing wrong with going back to the Yuntian Tower, but why are you in such a hurry all of a sudden? Rongxiu paused, and there seemed to be flowing light in his deep phoenix eyes. Because I've been waiting for too long. Digression, I have to deal with some matters. I'll be off at 6:30 p.m. You can get a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 16-19. His words were clear and light, but they were like the wind blowing over a pool of spring water. Chu Liyue looked into his deep eyes and suddenly realized something. Her heart beat fast. It's been too long since we got engaged. Rongxiu looked at her attentively and gently. Chu Liyue's heart seemed to be hit hard by something. She couldn't describe the sweetness in her heart. Thinking about it carefully, she had indeed kept him waiting for too long. In the middle of these years, she didn't even have the chance to ask what he had been through after she left and before they reunited. Rongxiu looked into her eyes and said in a low voice, I don't want to wait anymore. Bang. Before Rongxiu finished his words, a strange sound suddenly came. Chu Liyue frowned and looked at the interspatial ring in her hand. The sound of a collision just now came from it. Chu Liyue thought of something. A black wooden tablet suddenly appeared in front of them. It was the seabuckthorn wooden tablet of the Black Demon Cave that Chu Liyue had taken from Fangzhou City. Rongxiu's eyes suddenly turned cold. The totem on the black wooden tablet suddenly seemed to come alive. Every line was twisting strangely, causing people to feel a chill in their hearts just by looking at it. Then, the lines scattered and condensed into a line of dark red words that looked like bloodstains. If you want to save Chu Ning, I'll see you in the god-slaying tomb in 10 days. Chu Liyue's pupils shrank. The line of words quickly dissipated and condensed into the totem again. The pressure on it also disappeared quickly. With a clang, it fell to the ground. That's... Sheng Wanjing stood aside and didn't see the words on it clearly. Chu Liyue pursed her lips and gave off a shocking coldness. Sheng Wanjing was a little worried. How are you? What did she see just now? Why did she have such a big reaction? I'll go with you. At this moment, Rongxiu suddenly spoke. He raised his finger slightly, and the black wooden tablet flew into his hand. He looked down and then handed it to Chu Liyue. Chu Liyue looked up at him. Rongxiu, she knew what he was talking about when he didn't finish his sentence. Although they didn't even have a chance to talk properly after she regained her memory. But she knew what Rongxiu was thinking. She also wanted to go back with him and fulfill the promise from a few years ago. But at this moment, it's not the first time they've done something like this. Rongxiu chuckled. Whether it was for her or for him, those people had never given up. But this time they chose the right time. Rongxiu's tone was nonchalant, and only the cold and harsh look in his eyes showed his current mood. Actually, this is good. Lord Chuning is in danger. You can't be at ease. Rongxiu held her hand. We haven't had the time to inform Tianling. I think it's a little rushed. Chu Liyue glanced at him and then lowered her eyes. Rongxiu had always done things properly. He had even informed the academy. How could he forget his father and the others? Now he said this just to make her feel less uncomfortable. She held her breath and put the wooden tablet back into the universe ring. Then she looked up again. Rongxiu's rough fingers gently rubbed the back of her hand. I'll go with you. His voice was as low and gentle as ever. Chu Liyue's red lips moved slightly. In the end she nodded. Okay. Sheng Wanjing, who was standing at the side, was a little stunned. Looking at the two of them, it seemed that they didn't plan to return to Yuntian Tower? And the atmosphere seemed to be very wrong. Dumpling stood by Chu Liyue's legs. She clearly sensed the change in her mood and waited quietly. Taizu. Chu Liyue calmed down and turned to look at Taizu. What's wrong? Taizu looked at her worriedly. Chu Liyue said, that person has taken my father hostage. We plan to go to the god-slaying tomb. Sheng Wanjing reacted for a moment and then understood what she meant. You mean? Chu Liyue nodded. The person who could make such a sinister move was naturally the master of the black wooden tablet. Many thoughts flashed through Sheng Wanjing's mind. Then he nodded with a serious look. I've been to the god-slaying tomb before. I'll take you there. That place was extremely dangerous. Besides, the other party had come prepared. He didn't want Chu Liyue to go there. But Chu Ning was very important to her. Even if she knew it was dangerous, she would definitely go. Instead of dissuading her, it was better to go with her. Now Yuer's strength had improved a lot. And with him and Rongxiu there, she should be much safer. Chu Liyue was a little surprised. You've been to that place? Why didn't you mention it before? Even when she heard that Jun Jiuqing had exiled Chu Ning in the god-slaying tomb, Taizu didn't mention it. Sheng Wanjing's expression was a little strange. It's a long story. Let's go first. Hearing Taizu's words, Chu Liyue also nodded. I'm afraid we'll have to trouble you again on the way. Then Chu Liyue and the others left the Phoenix Mountain and went to the god-slaying tomb. Divine Dragon Island. Hearing the news from his subordinate, Mao Yang, who had always been expressionless, showed a rare look of shock on his face. Shengguan, you took a girl out of the Phoenix Mountain? But did you see if she was injured? It seems that she wasn't. Mao Yang frowned. His subordinate paused and then continued. And not long after she came out, Rongxiu also went there. They left together. But judging from the direction, it seemed that they didn't go to the Yintian Tower or Lingxiao College. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from love. Chapter 1620. Since they came out of Phoenix God Mountain, where else could they have gone? Mao Yang was confused. Although Shengguanyu was Shengguanjing's descendant, Shengguanjing had fought alone in the Divine Ruins world back then and did not establish his own force. The place that Shengguanjing was most familiar with was probably the northern region of the primordial world. However, it was obviously impossible for them to go there now. Rongxiu and Shengguanjing were extremely vigilant. Our people didn't dare to get too close, and then we lost them. The subordinate wiped the sweat on his forehead and said carefully, "It's all because of our incompetence. Please punish us, clan leader." Mao Yang shook his head. If we lost them, just let them retreat first. When it's a little later, we'll go out and ask around to see where they went. In addition, the most important thing was to find out what had happened to Shangguan Yu in the Phoenix God Mountain for more than a month. According to his understanding of Yi Zhao, it was unlikely that he would let a human who had contracted with the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan leave safely. Moreover, they had held the ancestral worship ceremony in the middle. At such a critical moment, Shangguan Yu could still escape unscathed. He couldn't help but suspect that there was something fishy going on. Also, find out who that little girl is. Mao Yang frowned. When Shangguan Yu entered, he was clearly alone. Even Shangguan Jing was rejected at the door. Why did a 3 or 4-year-old girl suddenly appear beside him when he came out? That little girl was obviously not human. It was very likely that she was a Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix. However, the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan was the same as them. There were no children in the clan. Those who could transform into human form were at least in their teens. This little girl's appearance was really strange. Yes. The subordinate hurriedly responded respectfully and was about to leave with a bow. Just as he took 2 steps, he was stopped by Mao Yang again. Remember, when you do these things, you must be low-key and cautious. The 1000 Summit is imminent, no accidents are allowed. The subordinate's expression became even more nervous. Yes. Lingxiao College. In the main hall of the Grand Orient Bell Tower, Dean Nansu Huai and several elders were gathered together. The 10,000 Wine Mountain has basically been cleaned up, but it will take a long time for it to be completely repaired. The few mountains that had been affected could now be opened again. Elder Hua Feng sat below and leaned lazily against the back of the chair. He let out a long sigh of relief. Only the heavens knew that during this period of time, they had been so busy dealing with the aftermath that they didn't even have time to catch their breaths. Fortunately, he had finally completed the bulk of the task and the rest could be taken care of slowly. Nansu Huai said, "Thank you for your hard work." Elder Hua Feng waved his hand. "This is what we should do in the first place. What's so hard about it? But it's just that the mountain is a little bald." As soon as he said that, the tense atmosphere in the hall immediately eased up. Nansu Huai couldn't help but smile and shake his head. Lingxiao College had existed in the Divine Ruins world for tens of thousands of years. The undulating mountain range was basically filled with ancient trees. Although the 10,000 Wine Mountain was a little special, the trees on it were the kind that required several people to wrap their arms around. After the shocking battle last time, the 10,000 Wine Mountain was completely destroyed, and everything on it was naturally destroyed. By the way, Dean, has there been any news from the Yuntian Tower? Didn't Rong Xiu send back a message that he would personally bring you and the others back to the Yuntian Tower? Elder Bo Yen leaned forward and asked curiously. When the remaining elders heard this, they also looked at Nansu Huai. It was obvious that they were still a little nervous. That girl had gone to the Divine Phoenix Mountain, so they couldn't help but be worried. It had been more than a month and they didn't know how the situation was. Nansu Huai nodded. It should be soon. Just wait a little longer. Suddenly his voice paused and he raised his eyes to look at the side window. Everyone followed his line of sight and looked over. Nansu Huai narrowed his eyes and raised his hand. Buzz. A transparent barrier began to fluctuate, creating ripples in the air. Then, something flew in from outside the window, passed through the barrier, and landed in Nansu Huai's hand. Nansu Huai opened his hand. It was a bronze sparrow. Rong Xiu sent a letter? When the elders saw this, they were all overjoyed. Nansu Huai squeezed his fingers. The bronze sparrow opened its beak and spat out a golden mist. The mist quickly condensed into 2 lines of words in the air. When Nansu Huai saw it clearly, his smile froze. As soon as he finished reading, the words disappeared. The elders sitting below didn't see the words clearly, but they saw the strange look on Nansu Huai's face at this time. Dean? Elder Bo Yen called out tentatively. What's wrong? Why does it seem like something's wrong? Nansu Huai came back to his senses and frowned. He looked at the elders and said in a low voice. Has safely come out of Phoenix God Mountain. Everyone was happy and relieved at first, but when they saw that Nansu Huai's expression was still tense, they found it even more strange. Dean, has safely come out. Why do you still look so worried? As Elder Bo Yen asked, his expression suddenly changed. Could it be that was bullied by them? She and Dumpling came out with her. Nansu Huai shook his head. The Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan's matter has been resolved smoothly. It's just that. Rong Xiu wanted to bring them back to Yuntian Tower, but you received news about her father, Chu Ning. Now they are on their way to the Godslayer tomb. The Godslayer tomb? The expressions of the several elders were all shocked. That place was extremely dangerous and they were going there just like that. No wonder the dean looked so serious. Just the few of them? Nan Su-Hui nodded. That was what he was worried about. The Godslayer tomb was vast and there were dangers everywhere. What's more, it was the enemy who invited them. It was obvious that the enemy had set up an inescapable trap and was just waiting for them to make their move. But Chu Ning was Yuer's father and they had to go. Nan Su-Hui thought for a moment and stood up. Bo Yin, I'll leave the school's matters to you for the time being. I'll go to the Godslayer tomb personally. The elders were shocked and they all said that they wanted to go with him. But they were all rejected by Nan Su-Hui. I can't leave the school alone. You all should stay. I've been to the Godslayer tomb before and it's more convenient to go alone. After saying that, without waiting for anyone to refute, his figure instantly disappeared on the spot. At the same time, on one of the peaks of Lingxiao College, Yiwenzhua suddenly opened his eyes and looked in the direction of the Donghuang Clock Tower. If left at this time? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1621. Lingxiao College had just gone through a calamity, so there was no reason for Nan Su-Hui to leave at this time. Something must have happened. However, he didn't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing. Yiwenzhua narrowed his eyes and pondered for a moment before he got up and headed to the side hall. Jiuqing. Yiwenzhua pushed the door open and entered. Upon hearing the voice, Jun Jiuqing, who was reading something, immediately put down the things in his hands and stood up. Master. Yiwenzhua's eyes quickly swept across the table, and he immediately frowned. Reading the letter from Baiming Dynasty again? Jun Jiuqing nodded. Father said, now that you're in the Divine Ruins world, you should focus more on this side. Yiwenzhua interrupted him. There's no need to pay too much attention to Baiming Dynasty. Don't forget which family's blood flows in your veins. When he said the last half of his sentence, Yiwenzhua's eyes were staring straight at Jun Jiuqing, carrying an indescribable pressure. Jun Jiuqing paused for a moment and the corner of his lips seemed to twitch. You're right, master. Jiuqing will follow your teachings seriously in the future. Yiwenzhua nodded in satisfaction. It wasn't easy for him to raise Jun Jiuqing, so he didn't want him to waste his time and energy on unimportant things. Yiwenzhua pressed one hand on the table and tapped it with his fingers. Nan Su-Hui left the school just now. A look of surprise appeared in Jun Jiuqing's eyes. At this time? I don't know what he's doing. However, I can probably guess a little. Yiwenzhua sneered. The fact that he left Lingxiao College at this time means that the matter is more important to him. It's very likely that it has something to do with Shanghaiyu. A dark light flashed in Jun Jiuqing's eyes and disappeared in an instant. She should still be at Phoenix God Mountain. If the dean goes now, it means that she must have left Phoenix God Mountain. Yiwenzhua suddenly stopped what he was doing as countless guesses flashed through his mind. Did something happen to the Shangguanyu? Yiwenzhua muttered. Jun Jiuqing lowered his eyes and asked after a moment. Now that the dean has left, what does master plan to do next? Yiwenzhua's heart was filled with anxiety. This time, Nan Su-Hui finally came back, but before they could confront him, he ran away again. After pondering for a moment, his expression finally settled. I'll go after him. You just wait at the academy. Jun Jiuqing raised his eyebrows slightly, adding a touch of wickedness to his already coquettish appearance. Are you sure? No one knew where the dean was going or what he was going to do. You follow me so rashly. It was precisely because of this that they had to follow him and control his whereabouts. Yiwenzhua raised his hand, indicating that he didn't need to say any more. You just have to stay here and take care of the matters in the academy. As for the rest, master will take care of it. Jun Jiuqing lowered his head. Yes, I will follow master's orders. Yiwenzhua's figure flashed and disappeared on the spot. The room became quiet and empty again. Jun Jiuqing raised his head, the expression on his face was much calmer. He lowered his eyes and glanced at the letter on the table, then sat down again. After he was done, he slowly put the letter away. Then he leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. After a while, his eyelashes fluttered slightly, and he opened his eyes again. But at this time, his eyes were filled with a biting cold murderous intent. Annihilated again? What are you doing? Digression. The famished February tossed out a small piece of supper and turned over to sleep. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1622. Send another one. Jun Jiuqing shouted in a deep voice. The room fell silent again. After a moment, Jun Jiuqing's gaze swept across the letter on the table. He immediately took it in his hand and got up to walk out. Before he reached the door, the void in front of him rippled. In the next second he raised his hand and waved. A black spatial crack appeared. His expression was cold as he stepped into it. The wind lifted the corner of his clothes and he disappeared in an instant. Phoenix God Mountain was very far away from the god-slaying mound. There was no teleportation formation between the two places. Fortunately, Chu Luiyue and the rest were not weak. If they traveled at full speed they would not be too slow. In addition, Sheng Wanjing had been to the god-slaying mound before, so they avoided many detours along the way. After traveling for a day and a night, they came to an undulating mountain range. Finally they decided to rest for a while. Night fell and the full moon hung high in the sky. The mountain peaks formed winding and surging lines in the dark night. They found a flatter place to rest at the foot of a mountain. The bonfire danced, elongating their shadows. Chu Luiyue sat cross-legged with her hands on her knees. She was concentrating on absorbing the force of heaven and earth. Although she was already a high god, after traveling at full speed for a day and a night, she had used up a lot of her energy. She needed to rest. Dumpling was lying beside her. She had fallen into a deep sleep. Chu Luiyue wanted to let Dumpling return to her body. It would be more convenient that way. However, Dumpling had just transformed into a human. She was curious about everything in the outside world. Chu Luiyue let her be. Hence, her small body could not support her weight. She fell asleep as soon as she landed. In comparison, Rong Xiu and Sheng Wanjing were in a much better situation. The two of them agreed that Sheng Wanjing would guard the first half of the night, and Rong Xiu would guard the second half. However, Rong Xiu did not go to rest. Instead, he took out a fist-sized round stone and polished it. The stone was black. Under the light of the bonfire, it did not have any luster. It seemed to have swallowed all the light around it. However, it vaguely gave off a sharp and cold aura. As Rong Xiu polished it more and more, the black layer on the stone faded away. A golden light was faintly discernible. Sheng Wanjing did not care about it. He knew that Rong Xiu was also a weapon refiner. And he was talented and powerful. It was normal for him to polish a stone. However, when the stone emitted a trace of golden light, it finally attracted Sheng Wanjing's attention. His eyes narrowed as he stared at the stone for a while before he asked with uncertainty, "What's the matter? This is black gold spirit stone?" Rong Xiu didn't stop and lightly nodded. "Senior Shengwan has good eyes." Sheng Wanjing exclaimed to himself. He was a weapon refiner venerable. Naturally, he knew how precious the black gold spirit stone was. It was extremely hard and could naturally nurture force. Divine weapons forged with the black gold spirit stone were of high levels. The level of a divine weapon was not only determined by the weapon refiner's standard. It was also closely related to the quality of the materials used. Some things could only be forged into high-grade divine weapons at best. This was because the Tianlei power of a king divine weapon was not something it could withstand. Meanwhile, some of them had great potential, and could even be used as emperor artifacts or martial highness artifacts. The reason why the black gold spirit stone was so precious was that it could withstand the Tianlei power of a venerable divine weapon. In other words, the success rate of using it to forge a venerable divine weapon was higher. Therefore, it was very famous among weapon refiners. However, the production of the black gold spirit stone was very low. It was also very difficult to find. Therefore, it was considered a treasure among treasures. Even a famous weapon refiner venerable like Sheng Wanjing had only heard of it in rumors. He had never seen it before. The Yuntian Tower was indeed rich. They could even take out such a thing. Sheng Wanjing decided to watch the Rong Xiu forge. The more he watched, the more surprised he was. This was because he realized that the Rong Xiu's talent and strength in weapon refinement had actually exceeded his previous expectations. Judging from the way the Rong Xiu polished the black gold spirit stone, he was skilled and nimble. He could even be considered to be a master. Even compared to Sheng Wanjing, he wasn't much weaker. Sheng Wanjing touched his chin. He raised his eyelids slightly and glanced at the Rong Xiu. The young man's handsome and devilish face was as clear as jade under the illumination of the fire. He was incomparably noble. Speaking of which, he only knew that the Rong Xiu was the number 1 in Lingxiao College's weapon refinement ranking. However, he had never seen the Rong Xiu forge with his own eyes. Now that he saw it, it was indeed quite amazing. Polishing the black gold spirit stone seemed simple, but the requirements were extremely strict. To be able to reach the level of the Rongxiu, experience alone was definitely not enough. More importantly, one had to rely on talent. Sheng Wanjing had always been very proud in this aspect. However, when he saw the Rongxiu's actions, he vaguely felt that the Rongxiu's talent seemed to be slightly better than his. At the very least, when he was at the same age as the Rongxiu, he definitely could not do this. Sheng Wanjing rarely admired anyone in terms of weapon refinement. Otherwise, he would not have been able to establish the record of defeating several weapon refinement venerables without being defeated. However, when he looked at the Rongxiu at this moment, he praised from the bottom of his heart. He was indeed a rare weapon refinement genius. However, the strange thing was that in the world of God's ruins, most of the rumors about the Rongxiu said that he was decisive and ruthless. In Lingxiao College, the fact that he occupied the top of the Azure Cloud Roll of Honor made everyone know that he was extremely talented and had extremely strong combat strength. However, it did not seem to be too exaggerated. Logically speaking, with the talent that the Rongxiu actually possessed, his reputation as a weapon refinement master was definitely much greater than now. However, it seemed that no one had specially mentioned it before. Sheng Wanjing frowned. Could it be that the Rongxiu was deliberately hiding it? Clang. A crisp sound of collision suddenly sounded, interrupting Sheng Wanjing's thoughts. He looked over and saw that the Rongxiu had already finished polishing the black gold spirit stone. The originally pitch-black round stone now shone with a golden light. The layer of black on the surface had been completely polished, revealing a layer of gold. It was clear and lustrous, but it looked extremely tough. Upon closer inspection, one could vaguely see a black pattern on the surface. Those lines flowed and changed into some kind of pattern from time to time, with an indescribable strange beauty. The Rongxiu took out a sharp silver carving knife and began to carve on it. Sheng Wanjing could not help but ask, "Rongxiu, what kind of yuan instrument are you going to forge?" The Rongxiu paused and the corners of his lips curled up slightly. "The pure gold armor that you wore previously shattered, so I thought of forging a better one for her." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1623. Sheng Wanjing was dumbfounded. Armor? Armor? How many black gold spirit stones will be consumed? Rongxiu paused and said, "This is not a problem. It's just that it might take some time. It would be best if it could be completed before entering the god-slaying tomb." Sheng Wanjing was so shocked that he couldn't speak. This, not. Question. Such a small piece was a rare treasure that was hard to come by in the world. He originally thought that Rongxiu was going to forge it into a short sword or something else, but he never expected that he was actually going to forge a set of armor for you. Some time ago, when Chu Luiyue went through the disaster in the Wine Mountain, the pure gold sacred armor on her body was indeed completely destroyed. Sheng Wanjing had also thought about this problem, but unfortunately he never had the chance. When he was waiting outside the Phoenix God Mountain, he was full of worry and couldn't calm down to forge weapons. He didn't expect that Rongxiu would be one step ahead of him. And it was with this extremely precious black gold spirit stone. Sheng Wanjing suddenly felt that the little stock in his hands was really not worth it. Compared with the black gold spirit stone in Rongxiu's hands, it was really inferior. Sheng Wanjing calmed himself down. "Anyway, it was for you, was a good thing. A good thing. Thank you for your trouble." Sheng Wanjing coughed. "But isn't it a little too late?" Their schedule was originally very rushed, and Rongxiu had even less time to forge weapons. And if he wanted to use this black gold spirit stone to forge a perfect set of armor, it would have to be a king divine weapon. At that time, it would be unavoidable for him to go through a lot of trouble. To complete it before entering the god-slaying tomb was indeed too difficult. Rongxiu's lips curled up slightly and he smiled faintly. "I'll try my best." Sheng Wanjing opened his mouth and glanced at the black gold spirit stone that was shining with golden light. In the end he nodded. He wanted to offer his help, but then he remembered that Rongxiu had already finished polishing it. It would be inappropriate for him to intervene now. He could only hope that Rongxiu's refining would go smoothly. Rongxiu lowered his head and continued what he was doing. His expression was very focused. His bony hand was holding a carving knife, and he was carving the stone stroke by stroke. Without making a sound, the black gold spirit stone had already changed its appearance. As Sheng Wanjing watched from the side, a thought suddenly popped into his mind. Why does Rongxiu look so familiar? It was as if he had seen it somewhere before. However, this thought only lingered in Sheng Wanjing's mind for a moment before he quickly suppressed it. Perhaps he was thinking too much. The night passed quickly. When the first ray of sunlight shone down, Rong Xiu stopped what he was doing. He raised his gaze slightly, glanced at Chu Luiyue and put away the item in his hand. At this moment, Chu Luiyue finally opened her eyes and slowly exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. After a night of rest, her physical and mental strength had basically recovered. The fatigue on her body was swept away, and even her eyes were brighter. She stretched lazily, and a few crackling sounds came from her body. Dumpling, who was beside her, heard the noise and also turned over. She rubbed her eyes and subconsciously leaned toward Chu Luiyue. "You," she mumbled as if she was still half asleep. She opened her arms and was about to hug Chu Luiyue's neck. However, just as she was about to pounce into Chu Luiyue's arms, she suddenly felt a chill at the back of her head. Dumpling's body stiffened. She subconsciously turned her neck and looked to the side. The honorable saint was smiling warmly like a spring breeze. Dumpling suddenly woke up. She abruptly stopped in her tracks and quickly retracted her small arm. Chu Luiyue was waiting to hug her when she suddenly saw Dumpling stop and retract her arms. "Dumpling?" Chu Luiyue was a little puzzled. There was something wrong with this child. Dumpling is so tired. Dumpling, can you go back today?" Dumpling shouted a string of words like a cannon. Chu Luiyue was stunned. "Of course." Before she finished speaking, Dumpling's figure had already flashed and disappeared on the spot. The next moment she returned to Chu Luiyue's body. "Phew," Dumpling let out a long breath. "That was close." Chu Luiyue was speechless. "Why is she in such a hurry? Is she tired out from yesterday? Are you feeling better?" Rong Xiu walked up and asked gently. Chu Luiyue looked up and nodded with a smile. She didn't know if it was because Taizu and Rong Xiu were both here, but she had a good night's rest. "That's good." Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. Let's continue." Sheng Guanjing buried the bonfire and raised his voice. Chu Luiyue nodded. The group continued on their way, heading toward the god-slaying mound. Red Moon Desert. The scorching sun hung in the sky, and heat waves were rolling. At first glance, it seemed that even the air was distorted. Only the lake in the middle of the desert had a hint of coolness. A gentle breeze blew, causing circles of ripples. A figure suddenly appeared beside the lake. Purple hair, purple eyes, and a long robe. Was Dugumabao. He stood by the lake and glanced at the sky. After sensing that there were no changes, he retracted his gaze. Looking at the calm lake, he narrowed his eyes and waved his sleeves. The water in the lake automatically parted to two sides. Dugumabao's figure flashed and quickly disappeared under the lake. Not long after, the surface of the lake returned to its usual tranquil state, as if nothing had happened. Dugumabao walked to the dungeon under the lake. In the dim and cramped space, there was still a faint smell of blood. A few black chains wrapped around two figures. They were Diwu Zhangze and Lan Xiao. When the two saw Dugumabao's figure suddenly appear, they were delighted. Diwu Zhangze smiled. "Big Bao, you're back." But soon, his smile froze on his face. "You're injured?" Dugumabao's expression was indifferent. "Just a small injury." Lan Xiao stared at him for a while and suddenly sneered. "TSK. Big Bao, do you really think that you can hide some things from us just because you've reconstructed your divine body?" Dugumabao was about to speak when blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. His body suddenly fell backward. Bang. He fell heavily to the ground. "Big Bao!" Diwu Zhangze exclaimed. Lan Zhao's expression also changed. The chains clanked as they were dragged by the two of them. Fortunately, Dugumabao didn't faint and stood up. I'm fine. You call this fine?" Diwu Zhangze's tone, which was always gentle, also became stern. Dugumabao wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. His face was much paler than before. He closed his eyes and said word by word, "That person is about to wake up." The surroundings suddenly became silent. Digression, 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1624. As expected. Lan Zhao's lips curled up, and a mocking smile appeared on his beautiful face. If not, Lingxiao College wouldn't have caused such a huge commotion. When they found out that something had happened, they already had this guess. In the end, it was really, "You fought with him?" Diwu Zhangze asked anxiously. Dugumabao paused. "Not really. After the sky shuttle array was destroyed, you repaired it. After that, I came back immediately." This injury was left behind because he didn't defend himself against the counterattack of the other party's power. Fortunately, it wasn't life-threatening. Diwu Zhangze and Lan Xiao were both shocked. Sky shuttle array? You asked that girl to repair it? As Lan Xiao spoke, he suddenly thought of something and his eyes widened slightly. This is the reason why you asked to memorize those Shen arrays day and night. Dugu Mabao glanced at him expressionlessly, his eyes saying, You just found out. Lan Xiao was instantly dealt a huge blow. You. How old was that girl back then and you already thought of this? Dugu Mabao, you're already so old and you're still doing this. How much did you suffer to memorize those things back then? You're really shameless. Although she was very talented back then, her level wasn't high enough, and the Shen arrays Dugu Mabao showed her were mostly too profound. In order to memorize those Shen arrays, she put in a lot of effort back then. If not for that, she wouldn't have been able to deal with Lingxiao College's disaster. Dugu Mabao looked indifferent. The college will be hers sooner or later. Protecting Lingxiao is also her responsibility. Although it was still a little early, this matter had long been part of Dugu Mabao's plan. Looking at his self-righteous look, Diwu Zhangze and Lan Xiao were speechless for a moment. After all, what he said wasn't without reason. Although the process was difficult, the original intention and result were good. From the looks of it, Dugu Mabao was not wrong. It could only be said that it was too strict. Pervert. Only that girl can stand you. Lan Xiao pouted. However, after hearing Dugu Mabao's words, their worries were greatly alleviated. Only one of his hands is hidden under the mountain of myriad wines. It should still be some time before it fully awakens. Dugu Mabao pondered for a moment before looking at the two of them. During this period of time, you two should reconstruct your god bodies as soon as possible. Easy for you to say. Lan Xiao leaned lazily against the metal chain at the side and reached out his hand to lightly knock on the cold and heavy chain. We've been here for so long, and you're the only one who's succeeded. Not only that, but they also paid a hefty price. Dugu Mabao's face darkened. Lan Xiao pretended not to see anything and shook his head lazily. Didn't you see that I failed last time? It took me a long time to fix this face. I won't be able to do it again in the near future. As he spoke, he looked up and glanced at Diwu Zhangze with a smile that wasn't a smile. Diwu, why don't you try? Diwu Zhangze took half a step back in disdain. Speak properly. Lan Xiao was really sick in the head. Give him some sunshine and he would be brilliant. He had just confirmed that Dugu Mabao didn't expose his identity in the world of God, and now he was making waves again. Lan Xiao closed his eyes and waved his hand. Anyway, you guys can do as you see fit. If he failed again, it didn't matter if he lost his life, but the key was that he might drag these two down with him. It wasn't worth it. Diwu Zhangze shook his head helplessly and looked at Dugu Mabao. It's naturally great that you didn't expose your identity this time, but there's no such thing as an airtight wall in the world. There will still be clues left behind. You have to be careful when you go to the world of God next time. Dugu Mabao knitted his brows slightly and then nodded. They had endured in the Red Moon Desert for 10,000 years. If they failed at the last step, it would be a huge loss. The previous 2 times were special circumstances, especially with Lingxiao College, and he had no choice but to take action. This was also the reason why he came back immediately after the matter was over. Alright, how's you are now? Diwu Zhangze actually wanted to ask just now. The level of the Sky Shuttle array was extremely high. Although she had Dugu Mabao's help, it was still a huge challenge for her. Dugu Mabao's expression softened. She summoned the divine realm and regained her memories. What? Really? Dugu Mabao's words immediately made Lan Xiao, who was originally planning to rest, energize again. Did you remember what happened before? Dugu Mabao's eyes flashed and he nodded. Actually, he didn't expect that she would. It was a pity that after the matter was over, she directly fainted. And he had to rush back to the Red Moon Desert as soon as possible, so he didn't have time to say more. She's injured, but Nan Suhuai and Rong Xiu are here, so it shouldn't be a big problem. That's good, that's good. Diwu Zhangze was overjoyed, and Lan Zhao's eyebrows were tinged with a hint of a smile. So, she has broken through to the exalted god level again? Dugu Mabao nodded. This was also what he was happy about. Back then, that girl had spent a lot of effort to cross that threshold. Once she was reborn, the past was gone and everything started from scratch. Not everyone had such courage and perseverance. Fortunately, she was finally standing in this position again. Dugu Mabao's lips moved and he said, but back then she took the initiative to leave the divine realm to Meng Xian to help her keep it. Losing her memory seems to have been planned by her beforehand? Diwu Zhangze and Lan Xiao were both stunned when they heard this. There was too much information in this sentence, so they couldn't react for a moment. You're saying that back then she did it on purpose? Diwu Zhangze asked dryly. Dugu Mabao narrowed his eyes. Basically, I'm sure. Rong Xiu should know about this too. So, when we asked him back then, he refused to say it directly. What? Dugu Mabao didn't say anything. Perhaps she was the only one who knew the real reason. Forget it, that girl has always had her own opinions. She must have her own reasons for doing this. Lan Xiao, on the other hand, was very open-minded. He smiled and raised his eyebrows. The next time we see her, we'll ask her personally. Won't everything be clear then? Huh? Diwu Zhangze suddenly frowned and his expression became serious. His reaction immediately attracted the attention of the other two. What's wrong? Dugu Mabao asked. Diwu Zhangze rarely showed such an expression. Seriousness, suspicion, confusion, worry. Diwu Zhangze raised his eyes, looked at the two and said word by word, the people from Black Demon Cave seem to have entered the God-slaying tomb. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1625. What are they doing there? Lan Xiao frowned. Haven't they stopped for the past few years? Why are they causing trouble again? The God-slaying mound was a dangerous place. Most people wouldn't go there for no reason. Even those who wanted to train or hunt for treasures wouldn't choose the God-slaying mound. There was nothing there except for corpses that had been deposited for thousands of years. Besides, the God-slaying mound covered a vast area. Once one went in, it would be difficult to come out. Just how bored were the people of the Black Demon Cave to go there? Dugu Mabao's eyebrows twitched. Can you find out how many of them went? Diwu Zhangze closed his eyes. A strange totem was faintly discernible between his eyebrows. After a while, he opened his eyes and shook his head. This aura is concealed very well. I can only temporarily determine that the people of the Black Demon Cave have gone to the God-slaying mound, but I can't guess anything else. If I were in the Divine Ruins world, I might be able to see more clearly. Unfortunately, he had been trapped here for tens of thousands of years and couldn't reconstruct his divine body. Naturally, he couldn't go. Those people have never had good intentions. As Lan Xiao said that, he suddenly laughed. However, after so many years, you can still detect their aura immediately. That's not bad. Diwu Zhangze snorted. No matter what, they had to kneel and salute me when they saw me back then. Although I've already cut off contact with them, it's always better to know your enemy. Dugu Mabao pondered for a moment and said, this is strange. Let's not make any moves for now and see what they're planning to do. Diwu Zhangze nodded in agreement. You and Lan Xiao can recuperate during this time. Leave the rest to me for now. 7 days passed in the blink of an eye. Chu Luiyue and the others were getting closer and closer to the God-slaying mound. In the evening, they arrived in front of a forest that stretched endlessly. The strange thing was that the trees in the forest were all black with red leaves that weren't dense. The leaf was about the size of a palm. It was extremely thin and had a serrated edge. At first glance, they looked like red flying daggers. Shen Guanjing looked ahead with a solemn gaze and said in a deep voice, this is the Scarlet Soul Forest. Once we pass through here, we will reach the God-slaying mound. Hearing his serious tone, Chu Luiyue felt a chill in his heart. This place should be dealt with carefully. She tilted her head and looked ahead. Under the gradually darkening sky, the trees in the Scarlet Soul Forest were like bony hands covered in blood, gently swaying in the wind. A faint smell of blood permeated the air. Chu Luiyue couldn't help but frown. It's poisonous. This Scarlet Soul Forest will emit poisonous gas from dusk to dawn. Therefore, the best time to travel was at noon. Let's find a place to rest first and move out tomorrow. Shen Guanjing explained. Chu Luiyue nodded and looked at Rong Xiu. Then they followed Shen Guanjing and stepped back. Outside the Scarlet Soul Forest, rocks were piled up. They found a relatively flat place surrounded by a few huge rocks and sat down. After Chu Luiyue sat down cross-legged, she quickly closed her eyes and continued to cultivate. After a few days of training, she wouldn't be as tired as the first day after running for a day. Therefore, other than recovering her strength, she used most of her time and energy to study Shen formations and prescriptions. Needless to say, she had already tried to repair the Sky Shuttle array with Debao's power. Now, she had basically mastered the Shen formations that she had learned from him. In the past, those Shen formations were quite difficult for her. Even if she memorized them, she might not understand them completely. If he wanted to use it, it would be even more difficult. But after going through the Sky Shuttle array, it was much easier for her to look at them now. In addition, she was also reading and studying the doctor's book of medicine that Elder Wanzheng had left for her. In addition to the prescriptions that she recalled, there were many things that she needed to understand. After Chu Luiyue was completely immersed in her cultivation, Rongxiu took out a brand new ink gold spirit stone and started to polish it. In fact, this was already the 8th ink gold spirit stone that Rongxiu had taken out. He polished one every day, starting at night and ending at dawn. He could always polish the ink gold spirit stone perfectly within this period of time. Sheng Guanjing was still secretly amazed at the beginning, but he gradually got used to it. In these few days he understood two things. Firstly, Rongxiu's family background is really rich. Second, Rongxiu's talent and ability in refining weapons was indeed far beyond his imagination. After struggling for a while, Sheng Guanjing also got over it. Indeed, only such a man was worthy of his After looking for a while, Sheng Guanjing suddenly thought of something and asked, Rongxiu, we are going to pass through the Scarlet Soul Forest tomorrow. Is your armor too late? Rongxiu stopped what he was doing and looked up. Sheng Guanjing hurriedly said, Don't get me wrong. I'm not rushing you. I know that your efficiency is already very high. It's just that these days you haven't slept or rested. I'm worried that you've exhausted too much energy. The Scarlet Soul Forest and the God-Slaying Tomb are both extremely dangerous places. You have to be 120% alert to deal with them. Why don't you take a rest today? He had been to this place before and knew how difficult it was to deal with. He was really worried that it would be more dangerous for Rongxiu to go in his current state. Rongxiu's lips curved up and he smiled. Thank you for your kindness, Senior Shengguan. Besides, this armor is about to be completed. I'd better finish it directly. It's about to be completed? Sheng Guanjing looked surprised. Rongxiu nodded. When this piece is polished, it's basically completed. Sheng Guanjing was stunned for a while. Rongxiu said before that he wanted to create an armor that was more powerful than the pure gold sacred armor. Then it had to be a king artifact, right? But why did Rongxiu say it so easily? A little later, I may have to trouble you to help take care of you Rongxiu raised his chin. I'll go over there and finish the last part. Triggering Tianlei would definitely cause a big commotion. He didn't want to disturb her. Sheng Guanjing nodded hesitantly. Rongxiu's expression was way too calm, so he couldn't even say anything that worried him. This man always seemed to be calm. No matter what kind of situation he faced, he could easily deal with it. After about 4 hours, the moon was in the middle of the sky. Rongxiu picked up the polished black gold spirit stone in his hand and stood up. He was about to walk forward when a young woman's voice suddenly came from not far away. This is the Scarlet Soul Forest? It doesn't look very good. Digression. These few days the update time has been more casual, so today's update will end here. I won't let everyone wait any longer. Tomorrow at 12:05 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1626. The woman's voice was very young, with an undisguised arrogance and coquettishness. It was as if she really did not put the Scarlet Soul Forest in her eyes. Rongxiu's gaze turned, and he lightly glanced in the direction of the voice. About 100 feet away from them, a group of people seemed to have just arrived. The one who spoke was a woman in a light yellow dress. She looked to be in her early 20s and had a petite figure. Her long hair hung down to her calves and fluttered gently in the wind. She looked rather fairy-like. Of course, one had to ignore her voice and the look of disgust in her eyes as she looked at the Scarlet Soul Forest. Beside her stood a well-built man. He looked to be in his late 20s with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. He was handsome. He was much taller than the woman. When the two of them stood together, the contrast was great. Behind them stood two old men. They were dressed in black and white robes. Their hair was white and they looked rather old. However, the aura on their bodies was obscure and powerful, making them not to be underestimated. There are so many places in the Divine Ruins world to train. Why did Father choose this place? This forest looks so disgusting. The woman stretched out her slender white hand and covered her mouth and nose. Her slender eyebrows were slightly knitted. In order to come to this damn place they had spent a lot of effort. Originally she did not have much hope, but when she arrived she realized that it was even more annoying than she had imagined. The white-robed old man standing behind her smiled and said, "Second miss, we are a little late." This Scarlet Soul Forest is filled with poisonous gas. If you come here during the day, the scenery of this Scarlet Soul Forest is actually not bad. Moreover, the patriarch asked you to come with good intentions, didn't he? But I don't want to come. The woman interrupted the white-robed old man's words and crossed her arms. Isn't it because that thing is here? But it doesn't have to be me and Big Brother coming personally. There are so many people at home who are idle, can't they just send a few people? Originally, her life at home was quite comfortable. Who knew that her father would suddenly send her here, not even giving her a chance to refute? The white-robed old man smiled embarrassedly. The black-robed old man's face was cold and solemn. Seeing this, he spoke. Second Miss, that thing is extremely important to you. The patriarch said that he still hopes that you can find it and bring it back yourself. That way you can also convince everyone. His tone was much harsher and colder than the white-robed old man from before. When the woman heard him speak, she unconsciously lowered her arm. However, she still felt uncomfortable in her heart, so she raised her voice slightly and said angrily, I'm the second young miss of the family. Even if I don't come personally, who dares to do anything to me? The black-robed old man frowned. At this moment, the tall young man finally spoke. Don't spout such nonsense. His voice was exceptionally deep and resounding, sounding like the beating of a drum. The tone of his voice carried the majesty and dominance of someone who had been in a high position for a long time. The woman called finally restrained her temper and stomped her feet. Got it? She dared to throw a tantrum in front of everyone, but she was afraid of her elder brother. This was also the reason why his father had sent him along this time. With him around, she had no choice but to suppress her temper. The young man gently patted her head, a doting smile on his face. Be obedient. If you perform well, I will reward you when we return. Before he could finish his sentence, his expression suddenly froze and his voice came to an abrupt halt. Seeing his strange reaction, the woman couldn't help but ask, Elder brother, what's wrong? As she asked, she followed her elder brother's gaze and looked back. She was immediately stunned by what she saw. Not far away, a man dressed in white stood with his hands behind his back. The moonlight was like water and seemed to be exceptionally gentle when it fell on his back. Even though it was already late at night and most of the surroundings were shrouded in black shadows, it was still difficult to conceal this man's peerless charm. In fact, there was no need to see the man's facial features clearly. Just by looking at his aura from afar, one could tell that he was already more magnificent than a million other people. Nanny widened her eyes slightly. For a moment, she felt as if her heart had been struck hard by something. The man only glanced over indifferently, then retracted his gaze and turned to leave. Nanny subconsciously opened her mouth, but she couldn't say anything for a moment. Sir, please wait. She didn't move, but Nan Yuxing, who was standing by the side, had already spoken. Rong Xiu stopped and turned back to look at them. What's the matter? His voice was as cold as jade striking against each other, naturally carrying some coldness and indifference. Obviously, he wasn't interested in continuing the conversation with them and didn't want to have anything to do with them. Nan Yuxing slowly clenched his fists behind him. May I know what you heard just now? Rong Xiu's expression was even more indifferent. I heard everything. The two of them weren't far from each other and he was powerful, so how could he not hear? Nan Yuxing's expression changed slightly. He didn't expect the other party's attitude to be so tough. But on second thought, everyone had some ability. It would be more appropriate for them to be frank with each other. He cupped his fists. What my sister said just now was just a casual remark. Please, I'm not interested in knowing this. Rong Xiu didn't wait for him to finish and interrupted him indifferently. He wasn't interested in the background and identity of these people. As for what they were looking for in the god-slaying tomb, he didn't want to know at all. I still have something to do. Goodbye. He still had to rush to refine the armor for you, and didn't want to waste a single second on irrelevant people. Nan Yuxing didn't expect the other party to not give him any face and felt very embarrassed. He was born noble and no one had ever given him such a face in front of him. Ah, how arrogant. He sneered. Eldest young master, do you want to? The white-robed elder asked tentatively. Although they didn't say the most important thing just now, that man still heard a lot. It was strange that this person appeared outside the Red Soul Forest in the middle of the night. They should really ask properly. Nan Yi reluctantly retracted her gaze when she couldn't see that figure anymore. She happened to hear the white-robed elder's words and her expression changed. Elder Bai Tong, what do you mean by this? He was just passing by and I didn't say anything important just now. Why are you making a fuss over nothing? Elder Bai Tong was stunned by the sudden reprimand. Why was Second Miss so angry all of a sudden? This. Of course it's because our mission is important and can't be easily known to outsiders. What? It's clearly because we didn't notice that someone was here. Why are you blaming others in the end? Nanny frowned. In short, we can't find trouble with them. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.